Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 162. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC News, or anytime you like on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook, where you also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb. And if you leave a comment under those videos, we're likely to see it, kind of. You can also tweet us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PepChazDrDave. If you want to contact me privately, ask me on Twitter. I will allow you to direct message or email me. Oh my God, I keep on forgetting to respond to my emails. I promise you, eventually I'm going to respond to the emails I'll get. But for now, let's reacquaint ourselves with the man who spent what I reckon the last 4 years, not once raising the stakes on inconsequential views. Not once. I'm talking about Dr. Dave Smith, of course. Dr.
Don't
Pepper.
go back through all the PEPs and check whether I ever did. I'm Dr. David Smith. I'm an associate professor at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, but I don't speak for either of those institutions, especially when I say things like exams are a bad form of assessment. I am definitely not speaking for the University of Sydney when I say that, where there are a lot of exams taking place at the moment, albeit at the moment we don't really have a choice because AI makes it quite difficult to rely on essays as a form of assessment. So until we can figure that out, exams are back, baby.
So we're in an era of 100% exam subjects again,
It's not going to be that, but
that's a shame.
Yeah,
I loved 100% exam subjects.
This technology invented during the Qing dynasty to select civil servants who could copy out hundreds of pages of Confucius without using characters in the emperor's name. That is back.
Yeah, I love exams. I'm very excited about this.
I can imagine you would have been good at exams.
Oh, I loved exams.
You know what I hate most about exams is my handwriting is so bad. Yeah. Like my handwriting looks like that of a 6-year-old sort of doing a half-assed task very quickly in order to get back to the Xbox or whatever. So when I get an exam that is someone's very difficult handwriting, I can't penalise that student for difficult handwriting because mine is so bad. So I just have to struggle with it.
Yeah, no, look, I didn't have great handwriting either, to be honest. But I just loved when with the 100. I always picked 100% exam subjects because it meant I could not go to class and play ping pong, which is what you're meant to do at uni. I feel like those days are gone, though.
Unfortunately, yes. Yes, those days are gone. Anyway, just to reiterate, I don't speak for the University of Sydney.
Fair enough. What are you grateful for, man?
I am grateful for the Indian election. For a number of reasons, not only for the result, because I do not like Narendra Modi's brand of ethno-nationalism. So if you're not on top of this, he is going to be Prime Minister again, but his party has lost its majority.
Okay.
And that was very unexpected. He was promising a supermajority. He was promising like 500 seats out of 700 or whatever it is. But no, in fact, he has slipped below a majority. And there was a lot of commentary this week about how that kind of majority rule he had been promoting was actually at odds with how government had always worked within India, which was by coalition, which was appropriate because it's such a diverse place that you can't just have one party dominating everything, especially not one that has this very exclusionary kind of vision of the country. So it's a good result that he has lost its majority, but it's good for another couple of reasons. One is it was an amazingly well-run election. Like the world has a lot to learn from India. India's obviously so big, but like world's biggest democracy by a factor of 4 or something, or more than 4 in population. It's so big that voting has to be done in 7 different stages over a period of weeks, months. Wow. But then results come in quicker than they do in a US election.
Well, because they spend months counting the first stage. Is that how it works?
No, it's not even that. They do count. I think they count postal ballots beforehand, but no, they're just very efficient.
Oh, okay.
With the with the way they do it, so the results come in quickly. No one's disputing the results. And I remember at Michigan, a guy I knew who studied Indian politics, Amit Ahuja, who still does study Indian politics. I remember him telling me that even though in India there's a lot of low levels of trust in government for good reason, he said the exception to that is the electoral authority. The electoral authority is actually very trusted. They're known for their diligence. They're known for their uncorruptibility, and they're also known for going the extra mile to actually reach everybody in the electorate. So this was good. It was a well-run election. And it was an unexpected result that proved a lot of kind of pre-analysis wrong. And certainly it appears in retrospect, a lot of the commentary I was reading in the lead up to the election seems to be buying a lot of Modi's own lines about his tremendous popularity. So, yeah, good to see that bubble pricked.
Sounds like America could take some notes from their electoral system. India's.
I'd say so. Well, America could take notes from almost anyone's electoral system.
I know, but it's one thing for Australians to go, oh, well, why don't you look at our system? But, we've got, obviously, not many people, whereas India has a lot more people.
Yes, yeah.
And so, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I appreciated all the AI artists' impressions of Chuckles over the week. They were welcome. They were all welcome. They were all lovely in their own way.
I haven't seen these.
I found them equally entertaining and disturbing. I'll show you some of them later on.
Okay, yep.
But what I am grateful for is easy.
What's that?
I am grateful for Dan, who is sick of me putting off getting new stings made. He decided to just make them himself.
Oh, fantastic.
And this week, he sent me this. How good is that?
Weren't you going to get Andrew Hansen to make some new stings?
He's just waiting for me to email him.
Oh.
I keep on not emailing him.
Jesus.
So
email really is a problem for you, isn't it?
Oh, just I've got so much reading to do, Dave. Who has time to email?
Yeah, by the way, everything I've ever said about comedy songs, Andrew is excluded from that.
Yes.
Andrew's good.
We did have a few correspondences about that, but I don't like to.
No.
I don't like to.
Andrew's good. You know, he and I
worked
worked at Dimmicks together for like a few weeks or months.
I did not know that.
That would have been in 2001. He wasn't there for very long because he was on his way to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
But he was definitely he had the most deadpan hilarity of anyone who had ever worked at Dimmicks before. It was good because
unless John Cleese worked at Dimmicks,
he could make fun of people and they wouldn't realise that that's what he was doing.
Yeah, no, that is what he does.
Yes,
anyway, I'm gonna get him to do some stings as well.
Good,
but eventually, once I open my email account.
Yeah,
but I'm actually going to do Chaz Unleashed today. Even if I've got nothing to say,
just so that you can use the
sting, because I love it so much.
Okay,
I might just do Chaz Unleashed just to say goodbye.
Okay,
but I love that sting so much. Thank you very much, Dan.
That was great.
It actually reminds me of that sting of when we used to talk about times we worked with Andrew Hansen. I worked with Andrew Hansen at Triple M. It reminds me of when I worked at Triple M.
Yeah.
And we got along with the boss really well at Triple M, and we'd often go to him to ask advice about our radio craft, if you will. And you can see the results right here on
Yes.
PEP. And on a number of occasions, we'd ask some fairly detailed questions about what we were doing, and he would respond with, "Hey boys, when in doubt, just shut up and rock."
I'm so glad that that's how he talked in private interactions.
He really did.
That's great.
Which is exactly the advice you would expect from the boss of Triple M.
Yeah.
Just shut up and rock.
Oh, that's fantastic. So real.
And now we can shut up and rock on PEP as well.
Yeah.
Thanks to Dan.
Shut up and PEP.
I'm very, very grateful, Dan. Well, let's shut up and PEP, Dave. Well done. Correspondences. All right. Use of deadly force correspondence, first of all. BS Man goes, do we have the Biden warrant where it says the same use of deadly force as on the Trump search warrant? I haven't seen it. I don't think they produced it. Can anyone confirm if the same wording actually appeared on both? BS Man's a bit of a skeptic.
Okay.
Look, I did actually had a look round. It has not been released. Fox News, Jackie Henricks reported that it had the same wording. Merrick Garland in the hearing this week, which I think is coming up later. also testified it was the same wording.
Yes.
But we haven't seen it with our own eyes.
And let's just point out, these things don't usually get publicly released. The reason why we know the wording of the Trump one was because Trump's lawyers, who had seen it, talked about it, but they misquoted it.
Yes.
The reason why we know that is because there is a boilerplate language that is used that, as we pointed out last week, has had to be incorporated into these FBI documents since 1992 in order to restrain the use of lethal force.
Which is exactly why I think it doesn't matter if we don't see it. It's common sense that it would be there because it's on every search warrant. It's just like you say, boilerplate language.
Yes.
If for those who I like, for instance, when you make TV segments, there you have for the call sheet, there'll be 4 more pages of just health and safety stuff that just gets printed every single time. It's the same kind of thing. So I'm sure they're telling the truth when they say that. I mean, they should release it anyway. It doesn't hurt. And just to tamp down on some of the stupid conspiracy theories out there. But
it's like asking, did that email really say, please consider the environment before printing this email out?
It is a bit like that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great analogy. But anyway, I imagine someone's putting a Freedom of Information Act request in, even as we speak. So it'll come out in 6 months' time when no one cares. Oh, Chuckles is all over it. When we've moved on and no one cares, then it'll come out. All right, Chaz is an idiot correspondence. When we were talking about the deadly force thing at the same time, you referred to blue on blue.
Yes.
I said the FBI weren't even wearing their blue gear and that. Backfire points out blue on blue doesn't mean in uniform, Chaz. It just means friendly fire.
Also, I don't think the FBI wear blue uniforms.
Well, I was thinking I was thinking of the FBI TV show, their bulletproof vests.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's real. And he says it doesn't even stem from the police at all, and it relates to NATO blue versus red exercises. Look, I know that. I was just making conversation. That's fine. But you're right. I'm an idiot. EV correspondence. Old Codger says the stats on Ford losses per car are distorted. Remember the Ford losing $100,000 per car.
Yeah.
By accounting that factors in it factors in research and development.
Yes.
There definitely isn't a $100,000 loss on actually manufacturing each EV.
Yes.
That does make sense. Thank you, Old Codger, for pointing that out. It also explains why sometimes the losses go up and down quite markedly between years.
Yep.
Because they have different development costs each year.
Yeah.
Polling correspondence. Annette asks, Dear Chaz and Dr. Dave, on the subject of young voters, something they touched on Pod Save America recently.
Yep.
Actually, I don't hate them at all. Why am I doing that? They're fine. On Pod Save America recently.
I don't think about them.
Yeah, you're right. We dominate. We don't have any competition.
Yeah.
Good point. On Pod Save America recently was how young these voters were last time Trump was in power.
Interesting.
Currently, 18 to 25-year-olds were anywhere between 14 and 21 the last time Trump held office, so their memories of that time may not be as clear as older voters. Also, they were anywhere between 9 and 15 years old in 2015 when we last lived in the pre-Trump era, so they may not see Trump as much of an aberration as older Americans do. Could this help explain their willingness to turn away from Biden? What do you think?
Look, that could definitely be a factor. Yes, that's an interesting point. Look, I don't have much more to say about it at this point, but I think that's entirely plausible.
Look, I reckon that could be part of it as well. I mean, my personal view is that the main reason for it is because the online world is so much more geared towards Trump than Biden, generally. I think I used this stat before, I might not have, that an internal analysis within TikTok found since November, nearly twice as many pro-Trump posts on TikTok as pro-Biden ones. There was 1.29 million pro-Trump posts to 651,000 pro-Biden posts.
Yep.
And if you use your imagination for a second, just imagine you have never thought of American politics at all. Like you're coming to it for the first time, right? Everything's new. If you're getting into politics with no context and you watch a Joe Biden speech, what are you going to think? It'd be really difficult to pay attention. You won't understand him for a start. He's hard to understand. He's boring. He seems very ineffective the way he speaks. Yeah. And then you scroll down to the comments underneath. It's all negative.
Yes,
like the comments savage Joe Biden. Even on Democrat videos.
Yes.
Like no one likes Joe Biden online.
Yeah.
So it's just wall-to-wall abuse for the guy. So it's got to have an impact. Surely, if people getting their news from online. So anyways, that's my take. But I mean, I'm sure the age is part of it as well.
Yeah.
Supreme Court correspondence from Paul. Would love to hear your thoughts on whether or not you think Biden would expand the Supreme Court if he manages to take Congress and the White House.
No.
Failing that, do you think there will ever be reform of the court and its lack of oversight? Rechecks and balances can only impeach them, etc.
In terms of expanding the court, no, absolutely not.
Yep. Why not? Why are you so sure?
Well, because first of all, Biden is a conservative in institutional terms.
Yep.
He believes that institutions shouldn't be messed with.
Yep.
Second, even someone who was a radical in institutional terms would find it very hard. FDR was not able to expand the Supreme Court. We're talking about someone who not only concentrated to himself, but also exercised probably more power than any president ever has before or since. He was not able to expand the Supreme Court, but even though he wanted to, because the Supreme Court kept blocking New Deal legislation. I think it is possible that in the future there could be some kind of reform, with these kinds of oversight measures that you're talking about. But I don't see expansion as being one of those reforms.
I 100% agree. I would be shocked if Biden ever packed the court. I mean, apart from anything else, he knows enough about politics to know that once you do that, the court's in free fall.
Yes, yeah.
And no one knows where it ends.
Yes.
And what comes after it.
Yeah.
And I don't think Biden's the kind of guy who'd be comfortable with that.
Yes.
So I don't think that's going to be happening. I also, to be honest, okay, let's put it this way. It's not going to happen till someone gets rid of the filibuster anyway, because there's no point.
No.
Packing the court unless you can get legislation through.
Yes, yeah.
So the first thing you should ask is, when are they going to get rid of the filibuster? I'm sure that's going to be happening, but that will be whenever they do. That will be their norm-breaking piece of legislation for that particular term.
Yes, yeah.
And then you can worry about packing the court somewhere down the track.
Yep.
But I personally, I don't see the point of packing the court anyway, generally. I agree with the fictional Biden I just described. I think you would ruin the Supreme Court. And it's got its problems, but I think you would destroy it if you pack the court.
I've got to admit, I like the sound of that. But anyway.
But yeah, that's all right. But also, you only have control of the court for 2 to 4 years before the next person packed it.
Yeah.
What legislation are you getting through in that period? I mean, remember, it takes a while for a court case to get through anyway. So when you packed it, when you controlled it, they would be looking at legislation from the previous Congress.
Yes, yes.
So it's not going to be very effective. The reform I want to see, and I do actually think it will happen at some point in time, is 18-year terms. I always say that.
Yep.
I think that'd be great. I'm not saying it would solve every problem. I don't think it would, but I do think it would be much fairer to give every presidential term to justices.
Yes, yeah.
That makes sense. So it'd be less game playing.
Yeah.
And you'd have less 95-year-olds.
Yes.
Which would be nice. I'd also like to see genuine statutory ethics rules for the Supreme Court as well, which I think will happen when there's a big scandal. It will then happen.
Yeah.
I don't mean Clarence Thomas type scandal. I mean real scandal, which is coming.
Yes.
It's coming for sure.
It is coming.
Yeah. And then there'll be some kind of stab of reform, and that will be the statutory ethics rules, I imagine. Okay, that's probably enough correspondence. There is other correspondence, but I'm conscious of the fact that there's a lot to talk about. So we may do more correspondence later on.
All right.
But let's start off with, because there is a lot to talk about with the Trump trial, because we only just touched it on last Friday.
Yeah.
There's a lot to go through now. We've had a week to think about it.
Yeah, okay.
Before we do that, though, I want to sort of cleanse our palate a little bit.
Okay.
We're going to talk about Trump at the UFC. That's a bit of fun.
Oh yes, this was his first appearance after the criminal trial. He shows up at the UFC, and I think this really highlights the fact that the UFC is in some ways a core constituency of his now. This hasn't happened by accident. He's got a long association with Dana White, the owner of the UFC. UFC is increasingly intertwined with the WWE, another thing that Trump has a long association with on a very personal level, like Lyndon McMahon, Vince McMahon's wife, was his secretary, not secretary of anything, but she did have a role in his administration.
She was Secretary of Labor, was she? Secretary of something.
She was secretary level. Jesus. Okay.
She definitely had the role.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll look
anyway,
it up.
she had So Trump is all
Maybe small business?
Yeah. So Trump is all up in this fighting for entertainment world, which is not surprising because it's...
Small business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it is overwhelmingly male.
Yep.
You saw the response that he got when he walked into the UFC.
Oh my God.
He's clearly more popular than any of the actual fighters.
I just had something occurred to me.
What?
That's where Trump gets his voice from. Like, the way he talks, the way he talks like that. He sounds like a wrestler.
Yeah.
He's like a wrestler politician.
Yes, yeah.
And he did at one point in time, wrestle Vince McMahon and shave his head and all this kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Like he's anyway, go on. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This is like a core constituency of his now. And for him to win, he needs these people to vote. Right, which is part of where his problem could be, is that so much of his expansion of the Republican coalition has been in groups that it is traditionally quite hard to get to the polls. Yeah. The kinds of men who support, I don't want to stereotype, I know academics who are really into the UFC, but your sort of modal UFC supporter is someone who wouldn't necessarily be a likely voter. Like, young man, not particularly well educated, not particularly engaged with politics. Although one of the things that's happened over the last 8 years or so has been the engagement of this crowd with politics through people like Joe Rogan and Tim Pool and Steve Crowder and all these people that we're talking about beforehand. These podcasters who sort of came out of nowhere, who don't have a media base beyond podcasting, but who have millions and millions of listeners.
They are the Walter Cronkites of the 20s.
That's right. They have politically engaged this group, and so this group, it could be the group that actually propels Trump over the line, but it could also be the group that lets him down.
Yeah,
the most if they actually fail to vote.
It could be the group that hears that he lost the election and go, oh, I should have voted.
Yeah. And I mean, there is this sort of demonology of young voters in the US. So James Carville famously complained, if you're relying on first-time voters, that doesn't sound like James Carville.
I was imagining
if you're relying on first-time voters,
it's not bad.
You're fucked. Yeah. I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but sorry, I don't know who that first person was. I was like, Chuckles' cousin from East Texas or something, but anyway, but the frustration that he was expressing was, for generations by that point, Democrats had relied on young voters who consistently let them down.
Yeah.
So from George McGovern onwards, there was always Democrats would get lower than expected vote share because young people wouldn't turn up. As I have mentioned before on this podcast, my personal experience of this was the 2004 election, when I remember speaking to these undergrads at Michigan who were really excited about voting against George W. Bush, and a lot of them just didn't vote on the day of the election. So there's this sort of demonology around young voters that they're unreliable. I've never actually seen a study that says how much more unreliable they are than anybody else, but this would be something that Republicans have in mind at the moment. And one of the reasons why, given the kind of polling leads that Trump has had, that he hasn't exactly been exuding confidence about it, it could be because they realize that a lot of, when New York Times Siena shows Trump and Biden 50-50 with young people, they realize that gains with young people are not necessarily reliable gains. Yeah.
I think you make a really good point there, especially about about how he needs these people. But it makes sense that he'll be out there campaigning, essentially.
Yes, yeah.
Because also he's like, people could believe these into it.
Yeah.
Like those people there would think he's authentically one of them.
He does have a well-documented love of martial arts movies, including an impatience with any part of the martial arts movie that isn't punching. So, yes, as we mentioned a few weeks ago,
fast forwards.
Bloodsport, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, he got Eric to fast forward through Bloodsport to cut it down to 40 minutes of just pure fighting.
I must admit, when I used to watch bad ninja movies with my cousin, I used to do the same thing. Just fast forward through all the dialogue. Let's just get the ninjas running backwards up buildings and stuff.
You know the worst ninja movie ever? I only know
Sakura Killers.
No.
Trust me, it's Sakura Killers.
I only know this because I saw it once on a bus from Canberra to Sydney. It's one of those night buses where to placate everybody they put a movie on.
What is it?
It was a kids movie.
Yeah.
This is like 3 ninjas at Magic Mountain or something.
Sure.
Yeah. Featuring Hulk Hogan.
Okay, I can believe that.
Yeah. Featuring Hulk Hogan as a washed up martial arts artist.
Now I'm gonna watch it now because I do love a bad ninja movie. But I was just gonna say about Trump and his authenticity at the wrestling. Like, it's not like, when you see those politicians, like you see, I don't know, say Tony Burke at a Lions game in a suit and tie with like a scarf. It's not like that.
Why are you picking on Tony Burke?
No, I mean, he's a nice guy, but I'm just trying to think of someone who clearly is not a Lions fan, right?
Yeah. Well, you could go through the entire history of various Australian prime ministers pretending to be Collingwood fans.
Exactly. And they're not gaining. They're not gaining
Back
anything
when I was
from
on
this.
Twitter, the Oz Kitsch account had an awesome thread about that.
As a great account.
Yeah.
That you're not getting anything but contempt when you do that, right? No. Whereas when Trump does this, he seems authentic.
Yeah.
And he could actually win votes. So I think that's a great point.
Going back to that 2004 campaign, I remember because Bush, even though he was profoundly inauthentic at most things, he could come across as authentic. So he, 1 year, in 2004, he did the Gentlemen Start Your Engines at one of the big NASCAR races. I forget which one it was. And then the next day, John Kerry gives this waffling speech like, I like NASCAR, and I'm glad that Dale Earnhardt Jr. won for reasons that fans of the sport will understand. Like, the fact that Dale Earnhardt had died. That wasn't something that was only known by, like, insider fans of NASCAR. He's like, we need a president. So I should stop doing impressions.
Yeah,
but he said...
You realize the man of 1,000 voices
he said, and they're all the same person. He said, if everyone had the same voice as Bernie Sanders, I'd be fine. But anyway, then he said, sorry, I haven't got to the end of this bad story. He said, but we need a president who could say more than gentlemen start your engines. We need a president who could say, gentlemen, start the economy. It was just one of the lamest, flattest lines that just it just confirmed everything that everyone feared about John Kerry's total inauthenticity. I cringed so far into my soul at that point that I don't think I've ever recovered.
I think you just gave me a sinus headache.
Yeah, it's
so bad.
It's so bad that I've got to say I don't think that it would happen today. Like that's a definite pre-Twitter one.
Yeah.
That was before political speechwriters had Twitter accounts and could see people getting dragged on them because nobody would allow a candidate to say that nowadays. Yeah.
Fair call. All right, let's get on to the first felon gear, shall we?
Okay.
Let's start with the actual verdicts.
Yep.
Because we didn't really discuss that much. What would Juror Dave have found?
I defer to, as I said last week, I defer to the jury. They're the ones who were actually in the court. They heard every piece of evidence. I wasn't there. I can't really comment.
You heard Jonathan Turley.
And I've got to say also, I would have found him guilty, but I wouldn't have made it into the jury pool in the first place because like half of the jurors there, I would have been quite honest. I couldn't have given Trump a fair trial.
Okay.
I will admit that. I couldn't have given Trump a fair trial.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I'm going to second guess the jury. I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about legal questions here because that's not what the jury do.
No.
I'm going to put myself in their position.
Okay.
Having seen the instructions that they saw.
Yep.
I would say that the records were clearly falsified. That was proven.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that they were falsified for the purposes of concealing another crime.
Yep.
I think that's proven.
Yep.
At least according to the jury instructions I'm talking about.
Yep.
The jury instructions were really, really clear that they were violating the
Yep.
Federal Election Act.
Okay, yep.
Because Michael Cohen clearly paid a lot more than the maximum amount.
Yep.
Which, according to jury instructions, was all you needed. So
Yep.
I thought that was proven.
All right.
That Trump caused or directed the false records to be made. Now that one I think is a bit more borderline, right? Did Trump direct them to hide the payouts in his complicated illegal method?
Yep.
Like rather than just record them however you want to record them. I think that, in my view, I'm not 100% sure that was proven, but I wasn't in the courtroom, so I don't know.
Yep.
I would also say, but it's kind of common sense that you almost certainly knew about it.
Yes.
I mean, because if they weren't trying to violate federal law, then why would they go through this incredibly complicated and opaque payment method? Like, of course. I mean,
if you're a juror, are you allowed or are you supposed to draw those common sense lines yourself, even if you haven't seen any evidence?
I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah.
We have a lot of lawyers.
We do. We really do.
Among the ranks of the Peppers.
Can you use common sense?
Yeah. Can you weigh in on this for us?
Or does it have to be?
Does it all have to be pure evidence, or can you use common sense to fill in the gaps?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and also, why would more common sense? Why would Weisselberg and Cohen do this unless they thought Trump wanted them to do it and had reason to think Trump wanted them to do it? They're just getting themselves in trouble and going to jail for no reason.
Yes, yeah.
Of course, there's got to be a reason.
Yeah. Well, this is probably why Renato Mariotti wrote in the New York Times that the defense actively should have made the claim that Weisselberg and Cohen cooked up the scheme on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
because people are going to draw that conclusion unless you tell them, oh, no, it must have been Weisselberg and Cohen doing it on their own.
Yeah. Oh, I think without doubt, I mean, we said this last week, that to me is clearly the weak spot of the prosecution argument. And I'm amazed that the defense didn't poke their thumb in there because it was just so obviously the weak point. So from my point of view, I guess it would depend how closely I want to think about common sense versus evidence.
Yeah.
If I'm just going on the evidence, I would probably say not guilty. If I'm going on my common sense, I'd go guilty. So I don't know what that means, but that's my thought.
Well, Jura Chaz. So you would have just kept the proceedings going.
Just going, how about that?
You would have been the Homer Simpson
probably
of the jury.
But they're having so much fun. Why wouldn't you want to keep it going? Jury correspondence, by the way. Mikhail says, small but important correction about the role of the jury in this case.
Yeah.
Dr. Dave mentioned the two lawyers who were in the jury and suggested they would have seen through any gaping legal holes. The role of the jury is not to resolve questions of law. We discussed this before. Only resolve questions of fact and to follow the directions of the judge for all legal matters, putting aside their prior knowledge of the law. I'd suggest lawyers would be more disciplined than anyone else in avoiding engaging in their own legal analysis.
That is a good correction.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll take that.
He goes on, but I think that I think he's actually right. It'd be the opposite. I think the lawyers would actually be the prosecutor's best friend because he would see the lawyers would be saying that don't worry about all the weird legal loopholes they're jumping through. Don't worry about that. That's not your job. Your job is to worry about the facts and worry about the jury instructions.
All right.
So the lawyers, I think, would have helped out the prosecution in that regard. Okay, so Dave, why did he lose?
Well, we mentioned before the theory, which I think holds quite a lot of water, that his defense was really constrained in what they could do.
Yes.
Because of the fact that Trump essentially required them to act as campaign surrogates, which meant not acknowledging any kind of wrongdoing whatsoever, which meant spending a lot of time fighting on points which they could not possibly win, which completely strained their credibility, and which distracted the focus from the weakness of the case that they could have pointed out. I think, though, that there's more to it than that. I think the prosecution made a strong case. Like, even if there were parts of it that were inherently weak, they actually seem to have done a very good job of putting this case together. And I remember towards the end of the trial, thinking like, yeah, my view on this has changed. I'm now quite convinced by what they were doing. And like, yes, it was a complicated legal theory. It was a novel legal theory, but they seem to have got it across pretty clearly to the jury. And actually, even my own sort of understanding of it, like as the weeks went on, it no longer seemed so implausible to me as it had done as it had done at the beginning. So those, I would say, are the two factors.
Okay. Well, look, I'll pick up on your first one because I think there's a couple of other aspects to it as well.
Yes.
The first one being about just how much lying was going on from the defense and how much lying they had to do because obviously Trump was making them do that. Like, I don't think the defense was choosing to do that. There's no way the defense would have said, hey, let's stand firm that you didn't have sex with Stormy Daniels when the entire world knows you had sex with Stormy Daniels. That's right,
yes.
Like, that's clearly a Trump thing. But there's a few reasons I think that's particularly problematic. The first one, which we have discussed before, is that is the reason why Stormy Daniels had to testify. If they had just said, hey, yeah, we had sex with Stormy Daniels and let's move on.
Yeah.
All her testimony is irrelevant.
Yes.
She doesn't need to even turn up.
No.
And certainly if she turns up, the judge would have a much tighter rein on her on what she could say.
Yes, yeah.
Like, because the only reason why she was allowed to talk about their sexual experience was because Trump was denying it, number one. And then number two, they were also saying, demonstrating why he'd want to shut her up with hush money payments.
Yeah.
But if he just stipulated to it all, then they don't need to hear it.
Yes.
And
have you looked at that section of the transcript, by the way?
I have. I have. It's pretty easy reading, I have to say. Yeah, I read through Stormy Day pretty quick, and the jury would have remembered it. It was memorable, and this is actually the main thing.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know this. I was shocked to discover this. In New York trials, you're not allowed to have a transcript in the jury room.
Oh, so right. So that's why they had to, have readbacks.
Yes.
Because, I read about this. Yeah. They said they want it to be the testimony itself that influences the jurors, not their reading of the testimony. I like that. It's an acknowledgement. No, I like no. I like that very much. Yeah. It's an acknowledgement that there are fundamental differences between written and spoken language and between reading and listening. When you transform spoken language into written language, the experience of reading that is very, very different from the experience of listening to that. Sure,
but the jurors get to listen to it as well as read it. The reading reminds them of the listening.
I disagree.
And give them video. Like that's fine.
No cameras.
I just don't think you should be forced to take a memory test when you're a juror.
No, they didn't have to. That's why they got readbacks.
Dude, reading 4 pages is not enough to having to read back on 4 pages.
Well, not enough by your standards. But these are people who probably, sleep at least 7 hours a night.
Yeah, I don't believe those people exist. Just stop lying to me, Dave. You're lying like Todd Blanche talking about Stormy Daniels. It's not just the transcripts that they can't have in the jury room. They can't even have the jurors' instructions. They can't have any. They can take notes.
Yep.
And then bring their notes in. But if they bring their notes in, they're not. I don't know how they enforce this. They're not allowed to use those notes against someone else's memory. Anyway, my point is, I think that's ridiculous. I think honestly, you're dealing with people's lives here. Like, people shouldn't be in the jury room going, "Oh, did they say that? Or did they say that?" Like, that's garbage. But anyway, we can agree disagree on that. But what I will say is this.
Yeah.
That, going back to why I brought this up, if you have this extremely memorable day of testimony, and it really was, that's taking up brain space that should be spent on other parts of the trial. It's distracting.
I don't know. You might. Well, I do agree with that general point, but just in defense of jurors and their memories, right? So we've got to remember our memories by this point are completely scrambled by the fact that we're consulting our phones every few seconds and we're in this online environment where it's just constant distraction. These jurors have spent weeks in the opposite environment.
Yeah.
They've spent weeks in an environment where the only thing they can concentrate on is the trial. That is the only thing actually happening in their consciousness. My guess is by the end of that period, they are remembering way more than you would actually expect.
Maybe, but all I know is when those jury instructions came out, I spent 3.5 hours on just a few pages trying to work out what the hell Mershon was talking about with some of this stuff. It was highly technical, and I don't know how the jurors would have gone with that. Okay. Especially when they didn't have them, when they had to hear them once and then go into a room. I don't like. That's not conducive to good decision making.
No.
But my point is, this was an extremely complicated legal question that where they were being asked.
Yeah.
Extremely complicated.
Yeah.
And they had to listen to it and then go make their call. If you're the defense or you're the prosecutor, I don't care who you are, you want to be really, really clear and make everything as simple as possible. You don't need to distract them with bullshit. You don't need them to be going, oh, is that relevant? Is that relevant? If you're the defense, you need to be just have 1,000 fingers pointing at what you want them to look at. And that is, where is the evidence that Donald Trump explicitly asked them to break the law when they recorded those those payments? That is the only thing defense wants them to talk about, or think about. The defense barely mentioned that because they were too busy trying to prove that Stormy Daniels was a liar and Michael Cohen was a liar and all these things which are just completely irrelevant. So I think their obsession with trying to disprove Stormy Daniels was a huge mistake. A massive. In fact, I would say that alone may have lost the case. So for so many reasons. Right? It also, the other thing that Stormy Daniels testifying because they had to continue his fiction was it meant that Trump couldn't testify. Remember, Trump wanted to testify. The reason he couldn't testify was because he was then going to get up there and lie about Stormy Daniels.
Yes,
the first thing they would do is ask him about Stormy Daniels. He would lie, and then he would go to jail for perjury. And so they just couldn't put him on the stand when they knew there was a 100% chance of perjury from him about Stormy Daniels. So he did not do himself any favors at all. No. Okay, so that's the first thing. And it was the same with Michael Cohen as well. Like this, there was so much focus on him for the defense to try and make him look shambolic. And they had to lie over and over again to do that. Okay. And as you say, it destroys their credibility as well.
Totally.
And from a jury's point of view, you're thinking, well, if I can't believe anything these guys are saying, they're not going to buy your defense.
No.
All right. But then on top of that, because this is so driven by Trump, they went really soft on Pecker. They let Pecker go.
And you've managed to say soft on Pecker. Amazing.
I didn't say soft Pecker. I said soft on Pecker.
We knew what you meant.
They just let him go. They barely cross-examined him. That's fine. And as it turned out, he was the critical witness. He was the one who they asked to have read back to them. So that's a real sign that the jury really cared about him because they didn't remember any bloody thing because of what I just said. So the only bits that they had in their mind was what was read back to them, which was 3 out of the 4 extracts were Pecker. And Pecker went unrebutted. So that is because he's Trump's friend. Trump's friend, and also because he has a huge box full of documents to blackmail Trump with, and Trump knows it. And so,
I've just got a piece of trivia for you.
Please. And for Trivia Chris. Friend of the show.
According to Wikipedia, there is no evidence of anyone ever having a photographic memory. So people who often claim to have photographic memories, that is photographic recall of situations, usually it turns out that what they have are extremely well-developed mnemonic devices for remembering things. There is no evidence that photographic memory actually exists, even though there are people whose memories have been so good, largely because of these mnemonic tricks, that they appear to have photographic memories.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think it's very good for Trivia Chris, but anyway.
Sorry.
But that was good. Thank you very much.
If I come up with better trivia, then I'll let you know.
The other thing, because it was a Trump-led defense, the only witness that the defense called was Robert Costello, who didn't help their case at all.
Oh, God.
And the reason he was there...
What was he doing?
Well, I'll tell you what he was doing.
Yeah.
He was there because he testified to Congress a few days earlier.
Yeah.
And he dunked all over Michael Cohen. And Trump would have seen that and gone, oh, yeah, I want a bit of that.
Yeah.
Because he's obsessed with Michael Cohen. And that wasn't helping their defense.
No.
And so he got up there.
Yeah.
He did what Trump wanted, which was just stupid.
Yes.
And then they proved that he was lying a heap.
Yes.
He had no reason to be there at all.
Yeah.
It was a huge liability for the defense, and that's because of the Trump-led defense. Okay. And then like I said, they missed the bit which they should be talking about, which was that key bit of evidence, which is what's the proof that Trump asked them to break the law when recording those hush money payments.
Yeah.
It's the only illegal bit. And so that's the bit they should have been focusing on. All right.
I can't believe PEP is giving Trump a better defense than his own lawyers did. It's a shameful state of affairs.
I reckon the UFC would have given him a better defense than
Totally.
his actual lawyers
Totally.
did. But once again, it's not because his lawyers are morons. Even though I did I did defame Todd Blanche many times.
Yeah.
It's because Trump is his own defender.
Yeah.
He's the moron. It's his own fault.
Yes.
If you want some proof, here, have a look at this. This is Todd Blanche talking about the contribution Trump made.
How involved was Donald Trump in his own defense?
I mean, what do you think? I mean, very involved. And he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He jokingly said to us a lot, sometimes he wanted to be the litigator. You know, he wanted to be the one that was actually arguing because he's a smart guy and he knows what he's doing. We made every decision together.
I love that. Yeah, he used to joke about how he wanted to be the advocate. That wasn't a joke, mate. That was not a joke. It's funny how Todd Blanche there is. Yeah, he's still Trump's the lawyer, but you can just tell he's warming up hey guys, it's not my fault. It's not my fault, guys. Psst, it's not my fault. But anyway, it's Trump's fault.
It is Trump's fault.
Yeah,
it is Trump's fault.
It's totally his fault.
Yeah.
All right. Were the charges let's talk about the problems of the trial. Were the charges too minor to fairly levy? Like when you're talking a big event, like the first presidential candidate to be indicted and prosecuted, were these charges too minor for that particular moment?
No, the charges related to what he had actually done.
Yeah.
That's how the criminal justice system is supposed to work. And the idea that, because of everything that he's done throughout his career, because of all of these other criminal charges that he's waiting, that this one should have been bigger. No, this one relates to precisely what he did, that prosecutor had the scope to go after him for, and that attorney general had the scope to go after him for. No, it shouldn't have been bigger.
Okay, I've got a few thoughts on this.
Yeah.
The first thing is I'm going to defend the charges a little bit, which is that they're definitely not as dubious as some suggest. I mean,
as we suggested.
Let's
call a spade here. They're not as dubious as we told everyone they were 4 months.
Well, no, okay, maybe I'm using the wrong word here. Because we always said they were complicated and weird and maybe
drawing a long bow.
Yeah, exactly. But what I mean here is that they're not like made up. They're not confected.
Yeah.
Like some people are suggesting just the whole thing's just a confection, right? They're not confected. Bragg didn't just make them up because Martin Shield wrote about them in Just Security in 2018. I'll give you the quote. At the very least, the payments should not have been billed as legal services. Falsification of corporate accounting can be prosecuted as a misdemeanor offense in the New York state. It can be charged as a felony if it's done to commit or conceal another crime, such as money laundering, bank fraud, or tax evasion, which could be the case here.
Yeah.
That's 2018.
There you go.
So there we go.
But I just want to reiterate, speaking of fraud, I have absolutely no qualification to talk about any of this.
Are you saying that you are a fraud?
I have, yes, exactly. Like, I have only ever been inside a courtroom once, and that was a school excursion to Waverley Magistrates Court. I remember there was a 60-year-old guy there getting busted for pot.
Yeah.
And the magistrate asked him, so have you got anything to say for yourself? Why were you smoking pot in public? And the guy said, well, it was my birthday, Your Majesty.
That's your experience in court.
That's my experience in court.
Okay. Well, look.
I love the fact that he used the term "Your Majesty." It
Yeah.
makes so much sense for a magistrate.
It does.
Yeah.
It should be their term.
Yeah, that should be their term.
Yes.
Yeah. But I thought it was a great defense.
Yeah. I will say this.
Yes.
That if appearing in court
Yeah.
qualifies you to talk about court, then I am certainly more qualified. Than
Yes,
them.
you are.
I am very well qualified to talk about the events.
As a
there.
defendant.
That's right. I was going to say as well, falsification of business records in the first degree, that's what Trump was charged with, is actually quite common in New York. Like, people were saying it's not common. It is common.
Yeah.
What's rare is for it to do with election campaign records.
Right, yes, yeah.
And the reason that's rare is because most New York politicians aren't running their own businesses when they run for office.
That's true.
Because we're talking about falsification of business records in the first
Yeah.
degree. That's why it's rare.
Very true.
Okay, so there is that. But all because the charges are very real doesn't mean they might not be too minor. I actually disagree with you. I think they are too minor, and I'll tell you why I think that. The reason why I think that is because, yes, he did it.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, one of the reasons why he lost is because he did it.
Yes, yeah.
Like, he clearly did it. Right, okay, so yes, I mean, I agree with you on that. He
Yeah.
did do it. But let's face it, this should be a misdemeanor. The reason this was 34 felonies was because I was trying to get around the statute of limitations. Right? In reality, this was a misdemeanor. And we'll get to the punishment eventually, but I hope it's punished like a misdemeanor because it is a misdemeanor. Like, that's like if we weren't traipsing around circumnavigating the world to get to this charge, if we're taking just a straight line, it'd be a misdemeanor.
Right.
Right. Like, the problem was that they falsified business records. Misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say that the first time a person running for president during a campaign is prosecuted, it should be pretty bloody good. It shouldn't be a misdemeanor, I reckon. And that's what I think this is. And so in my view, I mean, we obviously disagree on this. That's fine. In my view, it was too minor. Personally.
Okay.
But I mean, I can understand. Yeah, I just think if you're being asked the question, why are you taking this unprecedented action? The answer should be because we're responding to unprecedented corruption. And hey, as a target, he's the right guy.
Yes.
He is certainly
He
an
is.
unprecedentedly corrupt
He is.
individual.
Absolutely.
In terms of ex-presidents.
Yep.
Without a doubt. I have no problems with them going after him.
Yes, yeah.
I just wish it was one of the other charges. I mean, and let's also point out, it should have been one of the other charges. He put them off. They desperately put them off,
Yes,
which is
yeah,
the
yeah.
reason why this is the one that ended up going
Yes,
forward.
yeah.
No one was going, oh, yeah, you must do this case first. It was the only one left.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I should also point out as well, I'm particularly uneasy about these charges.
Yep.
Because the circumstances are so similar to Hillary Clinton in the same election.
Yeah.
like in the 2016 election, her campaign did Oppo research. That was what became the Steele dossier.
Yep.
And they called it legal expenses. They did the same thing. It wasn't hush money. It was Oppo. But still, it was mislabeling.
I had forgotten about that.
legal-
Yeah, you're right.
And you know what happened to them with that?
What?
What happened with them is in 2022 they settled with the feds with the FEC. Like, I think it was like $113,000 fine. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's what happened to them in 2022.
Yep.
The Biden FEC, they could have settled with Trump.
Yeah.
In 2022.
They absolutely could
or in
have.
2021. Like, I know that the Trump FEC wasn't going to be settling with Trump.
Yes.
But the Biden one could have. But they did nothing to begin with. And then New York did this. And so that to me doesn't feel like justice. I feel like whatever happened to Clinton should have happened to Trump. But yeah, we can agree or disagree. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with that?
No, I've got nothing more to say.
No, that's fine. Okay, all right. But yeah, I do want to emphasize they did have the right target. If anyone should be prosecuted, it's this guy, just for other stuff. I also want to say that the whole no one knows what the charges are thing,
No.
that's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's absolute bullshit. Not only...
When Trump said he didn't know what the charges were, I can believe that.
Yeah, sure.
I can absolutely believe that he never gave his lawyers an opportunity to explain it to him, or they tried and he fell asleep or something, or got distracted by Twitter. But that doesn't mean that the charges were unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely known. And not only the charges, but on top of that, the ways in which it was unlawful. Well, the options of the three options that people get hung up about. Those the prosecution wrote about them in November last year.
They did.
Okay, there's not something they just sprung at the last second.
No.
Like
The unknown did not jump out from behind the bench.
Yes, no, it did not. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. We're referring to the Willy Wonka experience, if you don't remember there.
Oh, by the way, Gareth pointed out that there is now a West End musical of the Willy Chocolate.
Of course there is.
Big
Of
Bang.
course there is. But at the very least, the lawyers knew about everything they were going to do back in November last year. I mean, I personally think that they should have, for the reasons I've just told you before about no transcripts, they should have spent a lot more of the trial discussing these from a due process point of view.
Yeah.
And the defense should have been rebutting them, and that should have been part of the trial. It wasn't part of the trial at all.
No.
But the fact is, the prosecution did say at the beginning, before it even started, that those were the unlawful means by which they were accusing Trump of falsifying records. Okay, so I'll take care of that as well. Oh yeah, okay. There is an argument from the left which we should acknowledge. I want to know your view on. An argument from the left is no, this is not a misdemeanor. This is super serious. Trump stole the 2016 election. That's what this is. This is Trump coming up with a way that he didn't lose the election. What
we are never going to know what the impact of this was on the election because it wasn't measured at the time.
Yes.
It can't be measured retrospectively. People are not going to have clear memories about it. So, look, we are never actually going to know what the impact of this was. It's plausible that had this come out, Trump wouldn't have quite got over the line because it came down to, 120,000 swing state voters?
Something like that.
Yeah. Not that many people. So it's plausible, but we're never going to know.
Yeah. No, we obviously can't know. I mean, I would say if you're going to run those kinds of arguments apply to Hillary Clinton as well for exactly the same crime.
Yeah.
But I also would say that that there is actually, even though we can't know for sure what would have happened if Stormy Daniels came out, we have not a bad analog.
No.
And what the analog was 4 days before the election when Karen McDougal's story.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The Wall Street Journal reported that the National Enquirer paid Karen McDougal $150,000 hush money 4 days before the election. Did it matter? No. So would it have been the same if Stormy Daniels was on the other page of like Karen McDougal was on page 4 of the Wall Street Journal and Stormy Daniels was on page 5 of the Wall Street Journal? I don't know. If the Stormy Daniels story came out the day after Access Hollywood, that might have killed his entire campaign.
Yes,
that's possible.
Yeah.
But you're right. We don't know.
No.
Okay. My next question to you is: was it a political stitch-up?
No.
Can you elaborate?
We have to bear in mind that in the deeply flawed American legal system, everyone's got a political identity.
Yep.
Now, the fact is that you can't have a non-partisan prosecutor. You can't have a non-partisan attorney general because everyone gets elected under party labels.
Do you think they should be able to?
I would personally, I don't think that these should be elected positions.
That's what I think as well.
Yeah. That's my view. I think
if you don't like it, get rid of the elections.
I don't think judges, prosecutors, attorney generals should be elected positions.
Yep.
As long as you have that, then you have, first of all, the inevitable appearance that everything is partisan. Second, the possibility that there will be partisan stitch-ups.
Yep.
But I wouldn't call this one a partisan stitch-up. As I've said before on the podcast, I do not deny the fact that Trump being who he was, a former president, that made him a target for this. I do not deny that at all. I would point out to everyone who's claiming they just did this to take Trump out of the election race that this investigation began long before Trump was actually a candidate and long before it was clear that he would ever be a candidate again. Okay, if you had asked most people when this investigation began, is Trump in May or in June 2024 likely to be the poll leading candidate for president, most people would have said no. So I don't think it was a stitch up in that sense, but I don't deny that Trump being Trump made him the target. Does that delegitimize this as a prosecution? No, not if he actually did it and was convicted by a jury. As I've said before, Americans are not crying out for fewer white-collar crime prosecutions, right? The fact that, they've made an example of this one person when there are plenty of other white-collar criminals that they didn't go after, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have gone after Trump. That means that they should go after more white-collar criminals. Americans would not be unhappy with that. They were crying out for prosecutions of white-collar criminals after the GFC. That never happened. This is not to scapegoat Trump for the GFC, but the fact that the fact that he was a target because he was Trump, that does not delegitimize the prosecution.
I agree. I also have the details of what you were referring to before about the indictment.
Yep.
Cy Vance, who was the predecessor for Alvin Bragg.
That's right, yes, yeah.
Began investigating the hush money payments in August 2018.
Yes, yeah.
Before Trump was even not being president.
Yeah.
And then he paused the investigation till August 2019 for the feds to investigate.
Yep.
Then they started again, continued on until November 2021 when he convened a grand jury to hear his case against Trump for the hush money payments. Okay, so they were contemplating indictment in 2021.
Yes.
Now, Bragg took over in January 2022. I don't know what happened with that grand jury. I guess they didn't give him what they wanted.
No.
Because in February 2022, two of his prosecutors left. Why? Because they were unhappy with his reluctance to indict Trump.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound very political to me.
No.
It's and then, like from Alvin Bragg, then on the 15th of November, Trump announced that he was running for re-election. That's 2022.
Yep.
And on the 6th of December, so that's 2.5 weeks later, Bragg hired Colangelo, the chief prosecutor.
Yes.
And they handed down the indictment 5 months later in April 2023. Now, that last bit I told you probably sounds like Bragg changed his mind after Trump started running for president again. Except 6 days after Trump announced, the New York Times ran this piece. The district attorney's office first examined the payment to the actress Stormy Daniels years ago before changing direction to scrutinize Mr. Trump's broader business practices. But Mr. Bragg and some of his deputies have recently indicated to associates, supporters, and at least one lawyer involved in the matter that they are newly optimistic about building a case against Mr. Trump, the People said. The renewed scrutiny of the hush money in recent months comes amid an intensifying swirl of legal and political drama around Mr. Trump. So they're on it months before Trump announced.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can make up your own mind, but to me, I don't think the indictment actually did follow Trump announcing. So there is that. I also think that there's a lot of talking points out there about some of this stuff, which I think is bullshit. Like, for instance, with Alvin Bragg.
Yeah.
A lot of people saying that he campaigned to, in inverted commas, get Trump.
Yeah.
And I say that advisedly, the inverted commas thing, because literally in every conservative news article I see, which refers to this, they have get in inverted commas to get Trump. And you go, so you think, okay, I'll give you an example, by the way, from Ben Shapiro. The legal case is an atrocity. It's a ridiculous case, a political put-up job by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, who came into office pledging to get, in inverted commas, Trump.
You're making him sound a lot more manly than he actually sounds like.
Not pledging.
Yeah.
Not pledging to find his criminal behavior that was actually criminal. Pledging to get Trump under any circumstances, he wrote. That's what he was pledging, apparently. But when you look at Bragg's actual quotes from the time, and I looked,
Yes.
they don't sound like that at all. They don't sound like Ben Shapiro, manly or otherwise. There's a PolitiFact article that notes all of them. I'll put it in the homework. You can have a look for yourself if you want, if you see it in the blurb. But I reckon this time I'm going to play you now was when he was most forthcoming about it. This is what he had to say.
I know a lot of people are wondering, whoever has this job, are they going to convict Donald Trump?
Look, that is the number one issue. We know he's investigating. And what I'll say is I was the first to announce against Cy Vance. I too have a lot of issues, which is why I decided to run. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. I was the chief deputy in the Attorney General's office. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times for the Muslim travel ban, for family separation at the border, for shenanigans with the census. So I know how to litigate with him. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case. So I'm ready to go wherever the facts take me and to inherit that case. And I think, it'd be hard to argue with the fact that that'd be the most important, most high profile case. And I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do.
And you believe it should happen?
I believe we have to hold him accountable. I haven't seen all the facts beyond the public, but I've litigated with him. And so I'm prepared to go where the facts take me once I see them and hold him accountable.
Look, he's not been a shrinking violent there.
No.
But he's not saying I'm going to get Trump either.
He's not, no.
Like that there is a reasonable speech from someone who's running for a political office.
Yes.
And once again, if you don't like it, don't have them running for political offices.
Exactly. It is also worth bearing in mind, you hear the term selective prosecution a lot. Like this is an example of selective prosecution. Like all prosecutions are selective.
Yeah.
These officers have limited resources. They have to make choices about what they prosecute and what they don't.
So this got me wondering.
Yes.
Where did that phrase come from? Get Trump.
I don't know.
Because they got it in quote marks. So where did it come from? You'll never guess. I found where it came from. It came from here.
And now this massive election interference at a scale never seen before in our country, beginning with the radical left, George Soros-backed prosecutor Alvin Bragg of New York, who campaigned on the fact that he would get President Trump. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. This is a guy campaigning. He wanted to get President Trump at any cost, and this before he knew anything about me, didn't know a thing about me. He was campaigning.
Now, what's fantastic about that is, even though the quote that keeps getting used is get Trump, no, when Trump first says it, it's get President Trump. Yeah. He thinks that Alvin Bragg campaigning after Trump's presidency was actually talking about President Trump.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should have said get Sir.
Yeah, get Sir. Get President Trump, Sir.
Yes. So anyway, so that was a bit pathetic from Trump. But and yes, Bragg did brandish his credentials about suing Trump when campaigning. That's all true. Yeah. But he didn't say anything inappropriate. And yeah. So anyway, so that's the first thing I wanted to put down.
Yep.
The prosecutor, this is another thing, another talking point. It's been out there a lot. Michael Colangelo.
Yes.
He was the number 3 DOJ person under Biden. How many times have you heard this? And so therefore, this is the link to Biden. This is why people say, oh, Biden's behind it, because he dispatched his number 3 prosecutor to go and take out Trump. Okay. All right. Lots of talk about that. What they don't mention, and they say it's a demotion. They say, why is he there?
Yes.
If he's,
so much of this.
Yeah, why is he taking this demotion for? It's because he's there to take down Trump on Biden's behalf, right? Okay. Where was he before Department of Justice?
Where was he, Shez?
I'll tell you where he was. He was working with Bragg in the office of New York State Attorney General. And what was he doing? He was investigating Trump's charity and Trump's financial practices. And he was involved in bringing various lawsuits against the Trump administration. So it kind of makes sense that Bragg would bring get the band back together
Yes.
when he goes after Trump.
Yeah.
This is the guy he's been working with for the past X years.
Yes.
So why wouldn't you get him? But you go, what that demotion? It's got to be Biden's got to be behind it because it's a demotion. Is it really a demotion? But as far as pay goes,
Yeah.
it dropped 3K from 183K to 180K.
Yeah.
Now tell me, what's more high profile out of being the number 3 at the DOJ?
Yes, yeah.
How many people have heard of Michael Colangelo as the number 3 at the DOJ
Yeah.
the first 2 years of the Biden administration? How many people have heard of him in the last month or two?
Yes.
I would suggest taking down Donald Trump is a much higher profile
I would say
position.
so, yes.
I would say that's not a demotion at all.
No.
I would say that's a promotion as far as his
Yes.
career goes
I'd say
from
so.
here.
Yeah.
Like he could run for office after this.
Yeah.
He couldn't run for office as the number 3 of the DOJ.
Yeah.
Right. So I actually think that leaving anything else
Yeah.
aside, just from a career point of view, this was the smart move.
This has struck me the way that people say, why would someone go from the DOJ to this obscure office in Manhattan?
Yeah.
It's like it wasn't like he was going to Akron, Ohio or Melbourne, Florida, to
right,
a
yeah.
middling law firm.
Right.
No,
Yes, that's a fair call.
yeah.
And obviously, well, if Joe Biden was behind this, trying to control these prosecutions, then
Yeah.
why didn't the feds prosecute Trump in 2021? Like I said,
Yeah.
like they could have.
Yes.
It's
Yeah. By the way, I've got nothing against Akron, Ohio.
Yes,
but
you
it's
do. It's
Not,
too
no,
late.
but it's not as cool as Dayton. Dayton is a cool place, which Dayton Peppers will know.
he's like a little duck paddling real hard to try and get away from the mess he's created.
Well, LeBron James is from Akron. I'm not going to insult Akron.
He's a pepper too.
but not as cool as Dayton. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and also so sorry. Okay, the judge. This is another thing. The judge.
Yes.
We've talked about the donations a bit. By the way, we're discussing about whether the donations were like T-shirts or like they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. They're Act Blue donations. So
Okay.
they're money.
Yes.
And Merchant donated $35 to Democrat causes. I've got the details here.
Yeah.
$15 to Biden's campaign in 2020. $10 to Progressive Turnout.
Okay.
And $10 to Stop Republicans, a group dedicated to resisting Donald Trump's radical right-wing legacy.
$10.
$10. Look, I don't know why you do that. I really don't understand why you do that. But I have to say,
Did someone show up at his door with a bucket? Was it to make them go away? Was it a pity donation?
I
I've
don't-
done that before.
maybe I don't know what's going on. This is the bit I'm most uncomfortable with.
Okay.
Like the donation. I don't like the donation. And by the way, I should just say, to be fair, lots of judges have small donations. Judge Chutkan donated to Obama.
Yep.
I tell you what, you don't hear often.
Yeah.
You don't hear about this from Trump, that's for sure. Eileen Cannon donated to DeSantis. You don't hear that very often.
No.
It's, and also, to be fair to Mashan, there was an ethics complaint. The New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct, they considered the ethics considerations and they dismissed it.
Yeah.
With a warning. They gave him a warning. That was in July 2023. But I mean, I must say that this does bother me. Does this bother you at all? I know it's so small, but just
Not really.
there are so many other judges. Why are you picking a judge who's donated to the opposition?
Because he was the best suited judge for the job.
I don't know. Are we sure? I mean, yeah. I think part of being the best suited judge of the job
Yeah.
is being the best public face. That's part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. I know. Anyway. I'm not going to talk about Lauren Merchant anymore. I'm sick to death of talking about Lauren Merchant.
Okay.
That's fine. One more thing about the whole jury thing. The jury came from Manhattan thing, right? This is actually a point from Melina Weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
The guest pepper.
Yeah.
The guest pepcaster. She made. I haven't heard anyone else make this point, which is a great point. People talk about, Trump got like 5% of the vote in Manhattan. She makes the point. Lots of people don't vote in Manhattan. Like 30% of the people there probably don't give a shit.
Yes. Yeah.
And guess who is going to end up on the jury?
Yeah.
Like when they're excluding people.
Yes, yeah.
The people most likely to not
That's
be
true.
excluded, the people who don't give a shit.
Very true.
Right? And so just probability suggests that 4 of the 12 people on that jury don't give a toss.
Yes.
Right? And as it turned out, one of those people on the jury, juror number 2, cited as his chief news sources X and Truth Social. So guess what his politics was,
Yeah.
or their politics was. You just need one.
Yeah.
You just need one for a hung jury. Trump didn't get one.
No.
It didn't get Truth Social boy. Okay, Trump didn't. Trump didn't get the.
Well, so there
give a
actually
shit.
is someone who uses Truth Social as a source of
Apparently,
news.
and X. Don't forget X.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't think that that's a good excuse either.
No.
Like it's and yeah, obviously he committed the crime in Manhattan. He lives in
Exactly.
Manhattan.
Yeah. The lesson
makes
is
sense.
don't commit crimes in jurisdictions that vote against you.
So yeah, so out of everything that people have said, the only thing I'm slightly uneasy about is I don't think the judge should have recused himself, but I just would have preferred if he wasn't the one appointed because of the donation.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's give this a break because there's just so much stuff we can talk about. I don't want to spend the entire PEP talking about this. Let's go to something else. Let's go to one of your topics.
Okay.
Should we do the hearings?
Yes. So
Yeah.
I don't know why it is, but House Republicans seem to think that they're pretty good at holding congressional hearings.
Yes.
Peppers, they are not. They are not very good at this at all. I mean, the best example of this is the impeachment hearings.
Yep.
Like, absolute waste of time and attention that just made everyone involved look stupid. Okay, so when the immediate response to something like Trump's conviction is, oh, we're going to have hearings into this, that's not something that's necessarily going to be helpful. There have been 2 quite exemplary hearings this week. One of which was...
When you say exemplary, you mean examples of what you're talking about.
Examples of what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So one was grilling Fauci and one was grilling Merrick Garland.
Yeah.
Now, it should be pointed out that neither of these are particularly popular figures at the moment. Everyone seems to find fault with Fauci's handling of the pandemic.
Yep.
And I think, since he's sort of largely disappeared from public view, I think really right-wing narratives have taken over, especially as in the origins of the pandemic space, basically, because there hasn't been any new development on that for so long. Basically, the lab leak theory is completely filling the vacuum.
Yeah.
Like the day that Fauci was grilled, the New York Times had this incredibly authoritative sounding headline in one of its op-ed pieces, like, the pandemic most likely started in a lab. Here's how we know how, with like fancy graphics and everything. But I mean, it was written by Alina Chan, who, yes, she is a molecular biologist, but she's been pushing this for a long time. And she came to fame as the person who was tweeting about this first, essentially. And it's not like she's the only biologist working on this problem. There are a lot of biologists working on the problem, and there is no consensus on it. And the majority of American intelligence agencies still weakly prefer, the animal theory. But anyway, the point is that at the moment, Fauci is in a weaker, less popular position than he was a few years ago. Merrick Garland he's getting it from all sides. People feel he's just not done. He's been so eager to be impartial that he's given a lot of free kicks to Republicans. Republicans, of course, think that he has politicized the Justice Department more than anyone else in history because they apparently don't remember the Trump administration. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is these people should be easy targets, right? But they actually managed to tear strips off the Republicans in these here. This is Merrick Garland, who can't tear strips off anyone. Both of them tore strips off, okay? And the reason was that they brought them in very quickly to ask them questions about something that they didn't actually know the answers to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? If you really want to, humiliate your opponents in one of these hearings, you ask them about things that you know the answers to, that you know are going to put them in an impossible position. Instead, So they were asking Fauci whether he had gone to the CIA to influence the CIA's opinion that it was the animalgenic theory of Wuhan. Okay, they didn't have any evidence about this. They just thought, this sounds like something that probably happened. And so and Fauci's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I haven't been to the CIA for 20 years.
Yes.
Like, they were literally just pursuing him on this because it was something that kind of sounded plausible to them. Because there was absolutely no basis to it whatsoever, they had to concede.
What they were doing was just taking stories of the week or stories of the day from conservative press in the last 2 months and just throwing them at him.
Yeah.
Like they hadn't done any work. They hadn't done any preparation.
No.
I mean, like for all his flaws, you can have a go with him.
Yeah.
Rand Paul does preparation before his hearings, right?
Yes,
Like he's had some famous stoushes with Fauci, right? And he's clearly a smart guy who puts some actual work in.
Yes.
These guys, all they did was just read the New York Post and just hold up a front page of the New York Post and go, how about this? I mean, I've got a clip here of Nicole Maliotakis. It's a classic example where there was just a story in the news. I think it was the day before Fauci about supposedly in 2022 and 2023 the institute that Fauci ran collected the equivalent of 175 years in royalty payments, $690 million in royalty payments in 2 years, right? Versus $23 million over the previous 12 years. Okay, it didn't this actual newspaper article didn't say that Fauci was behind it.
No.
Right, it just cited this, but they thought, oh, well, we might as well go for it.
Yes.
And this is what happened. It's just embarrassing.
Dr. Fauci, how much have you earned from royalties from pharmaceutical companies since the pandemic began in 2021?
Zero.
It says NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers. You're saying that you did not receive any of the $710 million.
On COVID, I received, I think, $122 for a monoclonal antibody that I made 27 years ago.
Okay, so just in general, though, how much have you received, not related to COVID, just in general, how much have you received in royalties between 2021 and 2023?
I think none.
Okay, so somebody received the $710 million.
Somebody did, but not me.
See, that's embarrassing.
Fucking embarrassing.
It's because she did no preparation whatsoever. She's lazy and I'm not sure if she's stupid, but she acted stupid with that question.
Okay, now we will come back to people in Fauci's hearing waving around news items because there's a lot more to say about this. But just to go to what they were going after Garland for, it was our friend Michael Colangelo who we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So Republicans were trying to suggest that Garland had sent Colangelo to brag. Yes. Once again, this was something they had no evidence for. It just sounded plausible to them. Yeah, within their fantasy land, this is something that probably happened. But once again, they didn't know the answer to it. So they asked him, and he was just very easily able to deny it. They're like, oh, so why did he take that job then? Yeah. And I think Garland's answer was, I suspect he applied for the job and he got the job. Like all Garland could say was no. Yeah. No, I don't know anything about it. No, I didn't have anything to do with it. And there was nothing that they could do in response. By the end of it, they're conceding, like, okay, you didn't have anything to do with Michael Colangelo, but this is a bad look. There could be the perception. There could be the perception that the Department of Justice influenced it. Yeah, like, why is there that perception? Because they're talking about it, right? So these are, it's the unprofessionalism that gets me. Yes. That this should actually be fairly easy to do. Like there are basic principles of political practice around going after people through committee hearings, but they're so, I don't know, kind of confident in their own fantastical narratives that they, as you say, they don't even bother doing any of the preparation or anything beforehand. So very few people have anything to fear from a Republican congressional committee. The exception, of course, is university presidents because they are so inept in those environments. Not only are they completely hamstrung by legal and PR considerations, they're not used to dealing with these environments of incredibly bad faith. And, they try to answer questions reasonably. These are bad move. You don't want to do that. You want, if someone attacks you, you want to go on the attack in response. So their only successes have been with these very weak targets of university presidents. When it comes to people who've got any experience of this shit at all, they keep falling on their faces. Let's go back to Fauci, though, because, the real highlights are yet to come.
Yes.
Now, what do you know about Fauci's relationship with dogs?
Okay. I'm pretty, unless you're referring to something I'm not aware of.
No, I don't think I am.
No, okay. I know of one particular story that was story of the day in the conservative sphere a few years back.
Yes, what was that?
There was a study involving dead beagles.
Okay.
Which NIAID funded.
Yes.
And it turned out, and it was all kind of, Dr. Fauci wants to kill beagles. It turned out that there was a board that approved this.
Yes.
And Fauci, I'm not sure if Fauci was even on the board at the time.
Yeah.
Like if he personally was part of the decision.
Yes.
He might have been one of the people making the decision, but he certainly didn't make it alone.
Yeah.
And that's all I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, shall we see what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say about this?
Let's see what she has to say.
Yes.
But this, as director of the NIH, you did sign off on these so-called scientific experiments. And as a dog lover, I want to tell you this is disgusting and evil, what you signed off on, and these experiments that happened to beagles paid for by the American taxpayer. And I want you to know Americans don't pay their taxes for animals to be tortured like this. So the type of science that you are representing, Mr. Fauci, is abhorrent, and it needs to stop. Mr. Fauci, you also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the COVID rules, including
I didn't hear what you
6
said.
feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You
I
made it
didn't
up
say
as you went.
I made it up.
So are you saying this is fake news, Mr. Fauci?
I didn't say I made anything up.
What did you say?
I said that it is not based in science and it just appeared.
But this is science.
What does dogs have to do with anything that we're talking about today?
These are scientific experiments. This is what you signed off on.
For those who are listening, when she was talking about the science at the end there, she was holding up a picture of a very confusing picture of two dogs with their heads in containers.
Yes.
And that's what he was saying. What have dogs got to do with this?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and she was also calling him Mr. Fauci because
Yes,
she
that's
refused to call him Dr. Fauci.
I have a grab for that.
Yes, yeah.
That explain it all.
Yes.
Is it right for scientists and doctors getting paid by the American people, government taxpayer paychecks, to get patents where they're paid millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in royalty fees, especially when the NIH and these government agencies, most powerful agencies in our country, are recommending medical suggestions and advice and making up guidelines like 6 feet distancing and masking of children? Do you think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes. No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Mr. Chairman,
Fauci,
objection.
I reclaim my time.
Objection.
I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time, Mr. Raskin.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Mr. Chairman,
Point of order.
Just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in
Gentlelady will
prison.
suspend. The gentlelady should recognize the doctor as a doctor.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is this what we have become? Is this what we have devolved into?
Now, so much going on here. Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to reclaim the Republican Party as the party of dogs.
Sure. Yeah.
Is this her trying to burnish her vice presidential candidates? Like, I'm a dog lover, not a dog killer? That's not going to help you with Trump.
No, it's not.
Trump would probably prefer a dog killer on balance.
Sorry, can I just jump in and just note that in the first grab we played, which was before the second grab we played, do you notice that she slipped in the Mr. Fauci in that first grab?
Mr. Fauci.
But it didn't get a bite.
No.
And so she wanted to make it more obvious because she was really proud of it.
Yeah.
That was like her value add.
Yeah, and just the bigger point here is, okay, so if you are the Republican leadership and you do want these hearings to have some kind of impact, they should have learnt by now not to include Marjorie Taylor Greene in these things because she will inevitably steal the show and just turn it into her own burlesque. Like, and you know, if there is a sliver of seriousness in what you are doing, it's going to be completely overshadowed by whatever it is she does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what sums up Marjorie Taylor Greene in these hearings the most. These Congress people, they tweet out clips of their highlights, right?
Yeah.
And often, especially in these kinds of show sort of hearings, they will basically just tee up clips for themselves, right? And over the years, they've gone from jousting with the person in the hearing to them just abusing a person in the hearing. And the person just being silent, essentially, and just being told off.
You're getting owned.
Yeah. So and you look at the comments under those and they go, oh, yeah, you showed them.
Yeah.
But Marjorie Taylor Greene's taken it just that step further.
Yes.
Because she goes for so long on these monologues, not letting them speak.
No.
Oh, by the way, before when Fauci didn't speak, Fauci was trying to answer and she said, I don't want to hear your answer.
Yeah.
The reason he was silent was not because she'd shut him up. It's because he was confused about how to turn on his microphone.
Yes.
We should just say that. But anyway, but she goes on these long, rambling monologues with this pre-prepared speech for so long that the camera stops moving to the person she's talking to and just stays on her, right? And what that means is her excerpt. You go to her Twitter feed, you'll see what I mean. She runs all these. She plays all these excerpts from herself, her highlights, and they're all just her talking. She could just be in a room by herself.
Yeah.
You never see the person she's talking to. You never see anyone else.
Yes.
You just see 20 seconds of her just dispensing just some angry, bitter wisdom.
Yeah.
And she could be doing it in our podcast studio. It just you just don't. There's no way you can know she's in the hearing. And that's where we're at now. We're to the point where she doesn't even care that you don't know who she's talking to.
No.
She's just random words.
Yeah.
She's good. She's precious. So much anger.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Anyway, so to wrap up this segment, Republican Congressional Committee hearings not effective.
No, they're not. Honestly, I know I've already mentioned this, but what they should really do is they should just go, if they're going to have a hearing with Fauci, they should just say, the next 10 people all go take a holiday. Let's just get Rand Paul in for half an hour.
Yeah.
Like, let's just have round 28 between you and Rand Paul.
Yeah.
Because at least, I mean, it's like the gain of function stuff. There's at least an argument there.
Yeah.
It's not like this dog shit. But anyway, okay, all right. Let's get back to the Trump conviction. Okay, so what was I up to? Here we are. Okay, political ramifications. Will it help Biden or Trump?
So it will not help Trump. Even though there was a spike in donations, WinRed crashed for a while. That's a pretty in the scheme of things. That's not very much. What the sort of thing that Jesse Waters was predicting, which was that Americans are going to be so outraged about this that they all flock to Trump.
Groundswell of support.
No. The question is, will it actually help Biden very much, if at all? If you look at the national polling averages since then, the movements have been so small as to be indiscernible or well within the range of statistical noise. But there has been some more fine-grained polling that suggests there could be some movement towards Biden. So probably the most detailed version of this we saw was the New York Times Siena poll.
Yep.
Repolled was 2,000 people who had been involved in that.
April and May.
Yeah, in the April and May polls, and what they found was nationally, Trump's lead shrunk from 3 points to 1 point.
That's right.
Okay, now that would be something pretty significant in the context of a very close race. What was also very interesting was looking inside that poll. They said of all of the African American respondents who said that they were supporting Trump, 20% changed their vote to, or changed their support to Biden after the conviction. White supporters, only 2% changed their vote. Now, this, if that is something that actually bears out, that would be something that's a bit worrying to the Trump campaign, because, as we've said before, so many of his gains seem to have been with African Americans as well as with younger people. There also seems to be some evidence that lower information, less engaged voters seem to be more influenced by this decision, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're not that engaged with politics, the fact that the president gets convicted, the former president gets convicted, not only is that something that actually cuts through, if you're less engaged, then you're probably not familiar with all of the Trump martyrology. Around, this is a completely rigged process. All you know is that he got convicted.
You probably know he got convicted for having sex with a hooker.
Yes.
Sorry, proper porn star. And paying hush money, maybe.
Yes.
That'd be all you know.
Yeah. Now, what we seem to be seeing so far at the moment is slight movement towards Biden. The question is this just your typical event-driven bump that goes away very quickly? Or is this the opposite kind of event? Is this something where the impact actually builds over time?
Yeah.
We've got no idea. This is more than an event because of the fact that this has now attached the convict label to Trump, right? So this is now something that Trump is rather than something that he did. It is something that has a very easy shorthand for people to keep bringing up through the campaign, the fact that he was convicted in a way that's got a currency that normal events don't have. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to, snowball over time. It might not. It might turn out to be nothing, but there is reason to believe that it could be something different. The other thing is that it's not over because his sentencing is taking place in July, a few days before the Republican convention. Now, who knows what that sentence is going to be? There have been some analysts who've suggested that if it's a light sentence, then that'll send the signal that this wasn't very serious to begin with. I don't know if I buy that.
No.
Like, if he gets community service, I think that's pretty bad. In some ways that could be worse because he's not going to get a custodial prison sentence that actually puts him in jail before the election. Like you said before, why community service would be quite a significant punishment.
Absolutely.
For him. And not only is it humiliating, it's funny. Yeah, so
it'd be devastating for him.
Yes. So, something like that could actually I don't think that would help Trump in any way, let's put it that way.
Especially if it was public facing community service.
Yes,
it was like picking up trash in the street. So there'd be all this viral footage of him out picking garbage.
Yes,
And people would be jeering, people would be sledging. It would be so humiliating.
Yes. But then again, having said all of that, even if he got that sentence, he probably wouldn't serve it before the election because he's not going to serve it, I'd say, until his appeal, which is a long time off. Okay. So we don't really know how it's going to go in the polls. I think the other danger for Trump is that this this rattles him. It wrong-foots him in his campaign, even though another confident prediction was, he'll be more invigorated and riled up than ever. His speeches immediately afterwards didn't suggest that. And now this is going to be one of the, this is going to be one of the points of the campaign that he can't escape, that he will keep coming back to, I think he would be very ill-advised to talk about it, but he's going to keep talking about it because he's going to keep talking about how it's rigged. Just another thing to keep in mind with the whole will this help him, will this hurt him thing is let's bear in mind what the other outcome of the trial could have been, which was acquittal.
Yeah.
There would have been no question that would have helped him.
Oh, absolutely.
That would have helped him very significant. I would have I didn't know whether to expect a movement in the polls from this. There hasn't been much of one. I would have expected a significant movement in the polls if he had actually got acquitted. That could have been disastrous for the Biden campaign. So obviously, this is a lot worse for Trump than acquittal. The question is this worse for Trump than no trial at all would have been? Yeah, and I think so. Like, in the end, a loss is a loss, right? A conviction is a conviction, especially for low information voters. This is now something that they're aware of about Trump, if they're not necessarily aware of much else. So I don't know how much it's going to hurt him. Say, doesn't seem to be much evidence of it actually hurting him in the polls at the moment, although even small marginal changes, could actually hurt him. But I definitely don't think it's going to help him.
Look, okay, that's all very interesting, except for you're completely wrong. And I've got the proof here from Lara Trump.
Okay.
Are you going to lose votes because of this conviction?
Well, I think the polls right after the verdict show that actually the opposite has happened. You had a 6% jump, or 6-point jump rather, for Donald Trump right after this conviction was read.
6% jump.
Which poll was that?
I don't know. I was looking for it. I was looking, what poll was this? I don't think it exists. I think she might have inherited her...
wow, she just completely made it up.
Yeah, her dad-in-law's tendency to...
So they didn't even conduct their own bullshit online poll or anything?
Maybe that's an internal poll. Maybe that's what's going on there. A secret poll, if you will. But yeah, so anyway, so you're wrong, clearly.
Okay, yeah.
I largely agree with what you just said, but I'll just flesh out a little bit.
Okay.
First of all, when you're talking about the black voters with the New York Times Siena poll, it wasn't just the black voters. It was the double haters. A fifth of the double haters moved back to Biden from Trump. Out of the 2020 Biden voters in general who had gone to Trump, a quarter of them went back to Biden as a result of that.
Yep.
And that to me is is like you said, not surprising.
No.
And also it's not surprising because they'd be the softest Trump supporters.
Yes.
So there's a lot of reasons that's not surprising.
Yes, yeah.
But also they're the critical voters in this election.
They are.
So if they stay in Biden's camp, then that's
that's
going to help Biden a lot.
Yeah.
I'd say like that. Yes, it's only a 2-point swing overall.
Yeah.
But that's a big 2 points. That could be the critical 2 points.
Yes.
In this election.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I'd say from a polling point of view.
Yeah. Although
there
is one group of people who don't feel that way.
Yeah.
So there was a YouGov poll this week. So in April, it showed 58% of Republicans said that a convicted felon should not be allowed to become president. But after Trump's conviction in Manhattan last week, that number plummeted to just 23%. Republicans in April said by a 41% margin that a conviction would be disqualifying. They now say by a 35-point margin that it's not disqualifying. Now, this just reflects the fact, obviously, that when people were asked about this on a hypothetical level, the Republicans who were asked about it, and so many of them said, oh, yeah, that would be disqualifying. They weren't thinking of Trump. They were thinking of Biden. Yeah, they're sure that Biden's going to be convicted at some point. They know that's going to happen. They didn't think Trump was going to get convicted. Yeah, after the actual prosecution, obviously, it's a different story. But still, 23% of Republicans saying that it's disqualifying. That is not a negligible number.
No.
When it comes to the potential
That's
closeness.
true. Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, even if he only loses 7%, which is what happened in the New York Times poll, they kept 93% of his support. 7% is the election.
Yes.
If he loses that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's 5 months away.
Yes.
And I think your point you made before about how does he react to this going forward is really important.
Yeah.
Because this moment lasts a very short period of time.
Yes.
his reaction, we know how Trump works.
Yes.
His reaction will be heard over and over and over again for 3 months, for 4 months, all the way to the election.
Yep.
So that matters. In particular, I'll tell you the moment which is really going to matter, much more, in my view, than when the conviction was handed down. The moment that's really going to matter is the convention. Which comes 4 days after his sentencing. If he goes on a tear for whatever his sentence is, if he goes on a tear and just ruins his own convention with bullshit about the sentence,
it's true.
That's going to hurt him because you get a bounce from your convention. If he loses the bounce because of that, that's going to cost him a point or two.
It is.
Yeah, so I think that's the key.
Another thing that I don't think I've seen any polling on this yet, but it would be useful to have is most of the analysis I've seen so far has just been Biden-Trump matchup. So you're really asking people, would you defect from Trump to Biden? But so far, I haven't seen what effect this could have on potential defection from Trump to Kennedy.
Yes.
Which we've got to bear in mind, who Kennedy will take more votes from, that is not a fixed quantity.
Yeah.
That is a variable in this election. It's going to be very important that could change significantly in either direction. And if this prompts people to defect from Trump to Kennedy, it's not as good for Biden as defecting from Trump to Biden, but that's a pretty good outcome for Biden.
Will this provoke political retaliation?
It depends on what you mean by political retaliation.
I mean, like
congressional hearings.
I'm sure it'll provoke, but like terrible, like Marjorie Taylor Greene holding up A4 pieces of cardboard.
Are you talking about Mike Collins saying red state prosecutors and attorney generals have got to get busy?
Yeah, I'm talking about that kind of thing.
So people like Dan Bishop demanding that Biden be charged for bribery in North Carolina because of student loan forgiveness.
Exactly. Let me give you some examples. Sean Davis. If you're a Republican running for office, Sean Davis is one of the editors of the Federalist.
Yeah.
If you're a Republican running for office, you can go ahead and throw away all your elegant little policy proposals for this or that corporate exclusion or tax subsidy. Give me a list of which Democrat officials you're going to put in prison or get lost. Mike Davis, the person who may be the next attorney general.
Yeah. By the way, I love the idea that at the moment, all these Republican candidates are running on elegant little policy proposals.
Yeah, that's what they do.
And that they're not currently running on promising to imprison Democratic officials.
Mike Davis, possibly the next attorney general, writes, "Dear Republicans, if your response to Biden's Republic-ending lawfare against Trump is 1, we must respect the process, and or 2, we are too principled to retaliate, please do 2 things. 1, fuck off. 2, leave the party. You are too weak, stupid, and dangerous to keep around." He seriously might be the next attorney general.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's an example. And also along the same lines, Larry Hogan asked for calm.
Yes. Yeah.
Regardless of the results, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process. At this dangerously divided moment in our history, all leaders, regardless of party, must not pour fuel on the fire with more toxic partisanship. And Chris LaCivita, the campaign manager for Trump, replied, "You just ended your campaign." So I'm talking about that kind of attitude. So what do you think?
Well, okay. So first of all, even though there's been a lot of this kind of rhetoric coming from Republicans, we're not seeing mass protests about this.
No, we're not.
We're not seeing the kinds of things that were actually promised by Republicans about that. Will we see it when a conviction happens? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for it. The polls, indicating, people seem pretty okay with the verdict when they've asked people, do you think that the verdict was right? I haven't seen a poll yet where the majority said no. I think I've seen small majorities saying yes, but
I think decent majorities.
Yeah, no, there have been some with large majorities.
It's basically 50 to 30.
Yeah.
So like the 20% edge there.
Yeah, saying yes. But this idea of political retaliation, the whole rhetoric of there's going to be, promising all of this political retaliation, which liberals, of course, fall for all the time, right? Now, let's have a look at this carefully.
Yep.
when conservatives say there's going to be all of this political retaliation, what they're saying is President Trump was only prosecuted because it's just so easy to go after someone politically as a prosecutor. And the only reason why this is the first time it's happening is because Democrats are just so unprincipled at this point in history.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Yeah, right? So they're actually trying to... They don't have serious plans for mass retaliation. What they're trying to do is to claim to their supporters that this is only happening for political reasons and that this is something that's possible to happen. The reality is, and I'm not saying that the US criminal justice system is perfect. I'm not saying that there's no instances of prosecutorial abuse in the history of the United States. There are plenty. What I'm saying is it's actually pretty difficult to prosecute someone when they've done nothing.
Yeah.
And the fact is, Trump happened to commit a crime in a democratic jurisdiction where he had lived for most of his life. When they're talking about wanting to prosecute Biden, they have to come up with shit like, let's say that student loan forgiveness is a form of bribery and charge him in North Carolina. Are they going to get a grand jury to agree to that? I don't think so. It's not actually as easy to just go and prosecute someone as they're pretending it is. They're pretending it's so easy because they want to say that it just, that's why it happened to Trump. That just brings us to another one of my favorite little pieces of rhetoric, which we've seen constantly in close conjunction this week, that this is only happening to Trump because it's Trump, because he's the presidential candidate, because they want to take him out of the race. Then you'll constantly hear in the same breath, and it could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
It could happen to you now. If we let this happen to Trump, it could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Which is it? Which one is it? Is it it's only happening to Trump because he's Trump and he's his presidential candidate? Or is it they're going after everyone now? They can go after anyone.
Shit, that's a great argument.
Yeah. Now...
You got him. He's got him. He's got him.
The reality is, as I said before earlier in this podcast, it did happen to Trump because he's Trump.
It did.
And no, they can't go after everyone.
Yeah.
It's actually hard to prosecute people if they've done nothing.
But also, as well,
Yeah.
like you said before,
Yeah.
Trump hasn't been the unambiguous favorite the whole time.
No, he hasn't been.
There was about 6 months there where DeSantis was the heir apparent. I didn't see any people prosecuting him.
No.
It's just Trump because he's done shit.
Yes, exactly. You have to have done shit.
I would love to see a list of
Yeah.
detailed people.
Yes.
Of people saying, okay, we can prosecute X for Y.
Yeah.
So far, I'll tell you what I've seen. I've read a lot of these tweets.
Okay, what are you seeing?
I've seen...
Who's on the chopping block?
I've seen a lot of Hillary Clinton, right? And you go, yeah, okay, let's all concede that Hillary Clinton could have been charged for her documents back in 2016. But you know what? Tough shit. Statute of limitations is up on that baby.
Yeah.
It's a 10-year statute of limitations. That was when she was working for Obama.
Yeah.
So that's gone. Right. Some people say Joe Biden with the documents, but remember what just happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the people said, no, we don't want to prosecute Joe Biden because that's not done. The prosecutor said, I don't think I can make a case.
No.
That's what just happened.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so have a go. Have a run up at Joe Biden when he's not president.
Yeah.
But the fact is, there aren't a million people out there with obvious solutions.
We've got to remember what happened when Republicans had the White House, when they had all of the resources at their disposal to do this. What do we get? The Durham investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was supposed to be the big one, remember? That was supposed to be the one that cleared out all of the enemies.
That was the one where you see pictures of Durham with the word soon written on it.
Soon. Soon.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many things wrong with the American criminal justice system, but the reality remains that you can't just prosecute people if they've done nothing. So I know that people are fantasizing now that some, 12-person jury of Trump supporters in Wyoming is going to convict Joe Biden of something. But unless he's done something in Wyoming, which, let's face it, is not out of the realm of possibility. Joe Biden's had a very colorful life. But he doesn't seem very worried about it.
No.
Yeah.
Also, like, it's not like Trump wasn't trying to get Hillary Clinton.
No.
Like people have just disappeared this. Like they go, oh, yeah, well Trump didn't get Hillary Clinton. Because in fact, Trump himself said, I'm going to insert, I'll get the clip later. I'll insert it right there.
Yes.
I just played for Dave's sake the Fox and Friends interview where he was saying, it wasn't good to get Hillary Clinton, so I didn't. No, you wanted to get Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Hang on. March 2017. Everybody's asking why the Justice Department and FBI isn't looking into all of this dishonesty going on with crooked Hillary and the Dems. At some point, the Justice Department and the FBI must do what is right and proper. The American public deserves it. May 2018. Trump told the White House counsel in the spring, this is a New York Times article, that he wanted to order the Justice Department to prosecute Hillary Clinton and James Comey, according to two people familiar with the conversation. Don McGahn, he's one of the people familiar with the conversation, rebuffed the president, saying that he had no authority to order a prosecution. McGahn said that while he could request an investigation, that too could prompt accusations of abuse of power. Mr. McGahn had White House lawyers write a memo for Trump, warning that if he asked law enforcement to investigate his rivals, he could face a range of consequences, including possible impeachment.
Back in the days when Trump had lawyers who behaved at least vaguely like lawyers.
October 2020. Unless Bill Barr indicts these people for crimes, the greatest political crime in the history of our country, then we're going to get little satisfaction. These people should be indicted. This was the greatest political crime in the history of our country, and that includes Obama and it includes Biden.
That includes Obama.
Yeah.
Just Obama was a crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he's writing that stuff, you go, it's just a tweet. When he's writing it, that's an instruction to the DOJ.
Yes,
that's how he operates.
Yeah.
And he just got ignored, right? But he wanted to take down Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
He wanted to.
Yes, yeah.
There has been no restraint. Like this idea of there's been restraint on the Republican side.
No.
That's just not true.
It's really not true.
January 6th, was that restraint? Was January 6th restraint? Was Donald Trump literally trying to steal an election restraint?
Yeah.
I don't think that's restraint.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have been watching the news this week, but Texas, do you know what's going on in Texas? Are you aware of this? This is not, the one I'm about to describe to you is not restraint. Texas is trying to pass a law at the moment that's going to make, in order to win statewide races in Texas, you have to win a majority of the counties.
Yes.
Most of the counties have no people in it.
Yes.
Right? So what that means is you could have three.
Oh yes, I did hear about this. Yeah.
You could have like 3.9 million rural residents outvoting 26 million urban residents under this system. Now I don't think it's going to get up.
No,
but you know what? The people trying to do that. That's not restraint.
Yes. Yeah.
This suggestion that now the gloves are off is just bullshit.
Yeah.
Been there for a long time.
Yeah. I just want to make one final observation about prosecutorial misconduct.
Please.
Okay?
Make that
Which is victims of prosecutorial misconduct are usually poor people, homeless people.
That's true.
Members of minorities. People who can't afford good legal defenses. People who are genuine victims of the system in any way. They're not the kind of people that Republicans want to go after. Anyone who can actually afford decent lawyers and knows what a decent lawyer looks like is not going to have a problem with this kind of political retaliation.
That is a fair call. I am going to play a couple of clips quickly here to illustrate what we're talking about. First of which is something which we haven't quite mentioned, but it's in the same kind of area, is Trump is leaning into this argument pretty hard with the whole the people will revolt if I go to jail kind of thing. I'm not sure how much the people can take. Rachel Maddow. I'm just going to play Rachel Maddow here because I wouldn't normally do this.
We have to.
You don't have to listen to it, but I'll play it for the people at home. But just because she made this argument quite well,
okay.
So I'll give her credit when she makes it. I'm not a huge Rachel Maddow fan, but when she makes a decent argument, I will credit it. And this is it here.
Trump was asked this weekend about his potentially being sent to prison when he gets sentenced next month. He said this in response. He said, quote, "I don't know that the public would stand for it. I'm not sure the public would stand for it. I think it would be tough for the public to take. At a certain point, there's a breaking point." He's saying, you jail me, there'll be a breaking point. The public won't stand for it. Sounds like a threat, right? It is a threat. It's the same threat he always makes because he wants us all to feel threatened. But he makes the same threat all the time. Right? September 2022, after the FBI served the search warrant at his home at Mar-a-Lago, he says, quote, I don't know how much more our country will be willing to withstand. 2 months later, December 2022, all caps, the people of this country aren't going to take it much longer. Then he was asked on a radio show about the possibility of him being criminally indicted. He said, I think if it happened, I think you'd have problems in this country, the likes of which we've never seen before. I don't think the people of the United States would stand for it. I think they'd have big problems. I just don't think they'd stand for it. Then in March 2023, he said if he was indicted, it would rain down death and destruction. That he said would be, quote, catastrophic for our country. Death and destruction if he were indicted. Then he was indicted. Then last summer, after he was indicted, he was asked about a possible prison sentence. He says, quote, I think it's a very dangerous thing to even talk about because we do have a tremendously passionate group of voters. I think it would be very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. So yeah, now he's threatening again that there's going to be catastrophic Civil War level violence if anything bad happens to him. Like an indictment, which has happened 4 times. Like an arraignment, which has happened multiple times. Like a conviction, which has happened 34 times. Like a potential prison sentence, which, stay tuned. At every step of the way, he has made the same threat. At every step of the way, he has shaken his fist at the country and warned that if anything happens to him, his followers will rise up and level the place. Death and destruction, like nothing the country has ever seen before. It's always the same threat. It is not actually what they do. Because it is not actually how the country feels.
She's right. No one does care.
That's true.
Like, it's just...
That's true. Good point, Rachel Maddow. Yes.
So she does it well.
Yeah.
Another clip I'd like to play along these lines is where someone just goes just that bit too far trying to do this, and it just leads to comic results.
Okay.
For those who don't know who Tim Pool is, he's a podcaster who has this, there's a bit of comedy with Tim Pool, which is he keeps on getting on these extremists onto his podcast, and then they keep on talking about killing people.
Yeah.
And then he needs to censor them, right? Because he doesn't want to get his podcast taken off YouTube. Right, it doesn't want to be definanced and all the rest of it, and this is making him very upset. He keeps on wondering why people keep on talking about death on his podcast, not thinking it's because I keep on inviting on jerks. Anyway, he invites on Laura Loomer, and you can imagine where this goes.
I'll put it this way: should Democrats be in jail? No question. When Donald Trump gets elected, should he start locking them up? No question. Should there be lists of Democrats that need to go to jail? 100%. And the reason for that is they've committed crimes. We need to make sure that when Donald Trump wins, we've got an attorney general, a deputy attorney general, a head of the CIA and the FBI. Kash Patel would be fantastic. We can have attorney general. There's some names floating around. And then they can start having their investigators and the feds issuing subpoenas, pulling up evidence, and with real evidence, bring them to judges for warrants. Then these people can spend three years of their lives fighting tooth and nail for the crime against the government for crimes they committed, and we can prove. Yeah. And the reason why we put them on trial is that we can show the whole world we will uncover what you've done. We will make sure everyone knows, and you will be held accountable for it.
Not just jail, they should get the death penalty. You know, we actually used to have the punishment for treason in this country.
They pulled the plug. They pulled the plug. They didn't even censor it. They said, nah, let's give up. abort.
Actually, I have just thought of something amazing.
What's that?
Well, imagine if they realize a few months into the Trump presidency, like, holy shit, we need to go after someone who's actually done something. 3 years of Bob Menendez.
Oh, yeah.
That would be fantastic. 3 years of putting Bob Menendez on trial.
That would be good.
Yeah.
That would be good. I like your vision.
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful. You have a beautiful mind, Dave.
Yeah.
Just to finish off this section, I have a toilet break for you guys. It's kind of related to this world. I'm actually going to put in the homework the entire clip. There's a guy called Carl Higbie. He's one of my absolute favorites from Newsmax. He gets quite worked up and it's a 10-minute segment about how Republicans need to fight back, right? Along the lines of what we're talking about. But I'm just going to play you guys now for the toilet break, just a 2-minute excerpt where he compares Joe Biden to Hitler, and he's put a lot of thought into this. There's a lot of parallels between Joe Biden and Hitler. I think you'll agree. I hope you don't find this too scary. Think of this as a history lesson.
And I'd just like to give everybody a little history lesson here. People always ask, how did the Nazis do what they did? People always say, I would have stood up against that. Would you? Did you stand up during COVID? Are you standing up now? Hitler didn't gas people on day one. Hitler first took over the media, just like this administration did. Even our own courts said that they violated the First Amendment. Who got fired? No one, of course. And what's worse, most people sat down because they didn't think it was their fight. Hitler took over businesses, just like Democrats are doing, and the NRA just had a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling in their favor. Again, nobody in the government got fired, though. And again, many people sat idly by because they didn't want to get involved, just like in Germany. Big government bailout promises. Hitler got elected. He got elected because he promised big government subsidies and shovel-ready jobs. Weird. Where have we heard that before? Biden, in defiance of the Supreme Court, has just forgiven billions of dollars of student loans, essentially buying votes. And most people said idly by, just like they did in 1940. Hitler took over schools, removed God, and instilled the state. Democrats are literally removing parents' knowledge of a kid trying to change their gender. Forget removing God. They did that years ago. And yet, how many people have stood up? Not enough. We started. But that's how it started. Hitler didn't take charge by force. He was elected by creating division among his enemies, just like what Democrats are doing between Republicans and rhinos.
I love Carl Higbee. I'm so glad I could share that with you guys.
That's fantastic.
Dave, you got you want to talk about Netanyahu?
Yes.
Yeah,
Let's talk about Netanyahu. Yeah. Okay, so last Friday, Biden took the step of unilaterally revealing a ceasefire proposal that had come from the Israeli government.
Yes.
With very little warning. They did warn the Israeli government that there would be a news conference to discuss Gaza. They didn't say that they were actually going to disclose this ceasefire proposal. Now, a lot of Biden's media mega fans were saying, oh, yeah, this is so great. Like, he picked the day after Trump got convicted to do this, showing how statesmanlike he is. Like, no. This wasn't actually to do with making a contrast between himself and Trump. The reason was sneakier than that. Friday was Shabbat, and the Israeli government was not going to be in a position to respond immediately. They were going to be caught completely off guard by this. So he didn't reveal the full details. In fact, no one actually knows the full details of this. Members of Netanyahu's own government are demanding to know what the full details are. It's also not known how supportive Netanyahu actually is of this proposal. Even though Biden said that this was Netanyahu's proposal that he was behind, there have been noises coming from the Israeli government saying that he might not be.
Did he say it was Netanyahu's proposal or Israel's proposal?
It's Israel's proposal, yeah. But they did say, suggesting that Netanyahu was supporting it. The major features that we are aware is that it would be release of remaining hostages during, I think it was a 6-week ceasefire, in order to negotiate a permanent settlement, right? So the whole idea is that this would actually be aimed at something bringing the war to an end. The ceasefire itself wouldn't bring to an end to the war, so it's not the Hamas demand for permanent ceasefire, which seems to have been Hamas's condition the whole time. But the idea is it would be, I think, the release of all or most of the remaining Israeli hostages in return for the release of a lot of Palestinian prisoners. And yeah, then this ceasefire for a period of weeks while negotiations take place over actually ending the conflict. Now, it's not known how Hamas has responded to this. I don't think there's been any Hamas response so far. in all of this, Egypt and Qatar are the main interlocutors with Hamas. Has been reporting that they are trying to get a response out of Hamas. But going back to Biden, Biden's strategy in all of this. So it's been widely pointed out that he's really attempting to box Netanyahu into this.
Yeah. That
he announced this proposal that Netanyahu supposedly supports to try to really not give him a way out of it. This puts Netanyahu in a very politically difficult position because he's getting pressured from two sides. On the one hand, he has got both of the other voting members of his war cabinet issuing him with ultimatums, saying that Benny Gantz saying he has to come up with a plan for the future of Gaza by
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Saturday.
Or Gantz is walking out of the cabinet.
Yeah.
That, we should clarify, that wouldn't actually end Netanyahu's government, nor would Garland going. But it would that would end the war cabinet as is currently constituted. It wouldn't end Netanyahu's government. What would end Netanyahu's government is the right-wingers threatening that any ceasefire at this point, anything short of total victory, they will walk away from the government. Part of me feels, and I've got no evidence for this whatsoever, and maybe I'm just projecting myself onto Biden here, that Biden is possibly trying to bring about the collapse of Netanyahu's government. And Biden has been getting more and more, I don't know what the right word for it is, but I think more and more aggressive with the kind of pressure that he's pushing on. A couple of days ago, a reporter asked him, do you think that Netanyahu is prolonging the war in order to stay in power? And Biden said he didn't know, or he couldn't comment on that, but there are certainly reasons why people believe that. And then he repeated that when he was asked it again. So it's clear that the Biden Netanyahu bromance is over by this point. I think that he has tried to walk that back, but yes. Yeah. Now, okay, as I said, but let's just say, if I were Biden, I would be trying to collapse Netanyahu's government at this point. Okay, forget all of the rhetoric about if this government collapses, then Israel won't be able to defend itself at all, and Hamas will win. We can't win the war. Forget about that. No, Hamas does not have the capacity to win the war. Hamas has the capacity to commit mass murder, as they did. They don't have the capacity to win the war. They're just not a big or organized enough military force.
They can't beat Israel.
No, they can't beat. They cannot. Absolutely cannot beat Israel.
What they can do is survive.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what they can do.
This is the thing. They can't beat Israel, but Israel can't militarily annihilate them either. That should be obvious. At this point, there's no this kind of victory that Netanyahu's promising isn't going to happen, and the fact that he keeps promising it does make it look like he's prolonging the war in order to stay in power for this impossible goal of trying to militarily eradicate Hamas. He can't do it. Yes, obviously, government collapsing, need for new elections would be disruptive. I don't think it's going to make Israel perform any worse than it's already performing. So if he's trying to collapse the government, as I say, maybe I'm projecting myself onto him, then I think that's good strategy, because it's increasingly clear to me that there isn't going to be anything remotely resembling peace while Netanyahu is there.
Definitely. I should just say that Hamas, at least according to Bloomberg, has rejected the US backed proposal.
Oh, okay. When was that?
This was 2 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
They say Israel must commit to a permanent ceasefire and full withdrawal.
Yeah.
Which is their position all along.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
All I was going to say, add to that, I mean, I've got 1,000 things to say about Israel all the time, but I'm totally unprepared for this particular part of the today, because I was spending too long looking at Hitler comments from Higby. I don't exactly remember why, but I remember thinking when Garland and Gantz came out a few weeks back, it seemed very everything seemed very staged.
Yeah, yeah.
Like in that Gallant had his little moment, and then 3 days later Gantz had his moment, and they both came out just after Gantz had been speaking to the White House.
Yes, yeah.
Like it did seem orchestrated.
Yes, yeah.
It did seem like there was white anting going
Yes,
on.
yeah.
And to be fair to the Biden administration, Netanyahu's been white anting right back for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a very long time.
Yes, yeah.
So it's so it's kind of not a surprise. It's
Yeah. And on that point, so Republicans in Congress are getting Netanyahu into to address Congress, and Democrats actually agreed to it. And we've
Schumer agreed to it. Like the week after he'd called for Netanyahu to stand down.
Hakeem Jeffries agreed to it. We've put an article in the homework about why that's a bad idea for Democrats, and it's worth going back to some polling about this, which is in April 2024, 69% of Jewish American survey respondents said they were supporting the Democratic Party. In other words, around the same number that it has been for decades. The current war hasn't changed anything about that at all. The majority of Jewish voters believe that Biden's handling of the crisis is about right. That drops with younger Jewish voters. The whole thing that Trump keeps going on about, which is that Jews who vote Democratic are traitors to Israel and are traitors to hate their religion.
Yeah.
Not only is that, to my ears, pretty blatantly anti-Semitic, suggesting that every American Jew is actually an Israeli who needs to be loyal to Israel. It's also just empirically very wrong. The base of support, the biggest base of pro-Israel support in the United States is evangelical Christians. As this article points out, that for years, Netanyahu has been cultivating this base of people who think that he personally is going to hell, but nonetheless that it's very important for Christians to support Israel for a variety of reasons, including bringing about the apocalypse in some cases.
It's a good reason.
Yeah.
As far as reasons go.
I can't stress that is a much vaster base of support in the American electorate than the Jewish electorate, which is about 2% of the population. That evangelical, well, I mean, there are many ways of measuring the evangelical electorate, but let's say 20%. So that is a much bigger base of support. But for Democrats, Jews are a far bigger voter base for them than evangelical Christians are, and they're not going to lose Jewish votes by by refusing to go along with stunts like getting Netanyahu to address Congress.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Actually, I'll tell you what, I saw an interesting graph, which is it's around the area where you're at in the moment, which is the Jewish politics in America. Here we go. Okay, so this was from a YouGov poll of 6,000 Americans, February to March 2024. The vertical axis here is showing you how much more sympathetic people are to Israelis than to Palestinians.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So you see on the left side of the graph, the people who are least favorable towards Jewish people. Unsurprisingly, if they're Republicans, they are less favorable towards Israelis overall than Palestinians.
Yep.
Right? Well, only marginally more favorable. Whereas they're much more favorable to Israelis than Palestinians for the people who are most favorable towards Jewish people.
Right,
For Democrats, but it's basically a flat line.
Yes, yeah.
And the reason for this is because the Democrats in their particular, they have a particular ideology.
Yes.
Where they care about the outcome of Palestinians versus Israelis. And so it doesn't really matter whether they're pro-Jewish or not.
Yes.
Their ideology has a certain outcome.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Republicans, they don't actually have that particular ideology, which means essentially if they like Jews, then they are going to be supportive of Jews.
Yes.
if they're anti-Jewish, then they're going to be more supportive of Palestinians.
Which explains why they think that anybody who opposes Israel must be anti-Semitic.
Exactly.
Because that's how it goes in their circles.
Exactly, that's my point. Whereas
Yes.
for the Democrats, anti-Zionism does not mean anti-Semitic, because anti-Zionism is just their ideology. Right, so that is, anyway, I thought it was a really interesting graph.
It is.
So there we go. You got anything else on this topic?
No.
No? Okay, all right, now we'll wrap up. I am going to just ask you, because you started something before, so we might as well just finish that thing. We might as well finish that thing which you brought up, which was sentencing. Yeah, the sentencing of Trump I'm talking about.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
yes.
you brought up the idea of sentencing, and I kind of moved in there a little bit by saying how I hope I hope when sentencing happens, he gets a misdemeanor-like sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I should say that Mashan has a reputation of being harsh on white-collar criminals.
Okay,
so
yep.
we'll see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the crime is a very petty crime. It's Class E felony, maximum 4 years prison. But if you're a first offender, that's a maximum of 1 year prison actually in New York. But I mean, obviously Trump's behavior is particularly bad, which is why one analyst said on CNN this.
If you removed the name Donald Trump from his consideration, and it was somebody who came before him for sentence that also had 3 open other felony indictments in 3 other jurisdictions in both state and federal court. He's somebody who has been convicted of 34 felony counts, was held in contempt 10 times for disobeying Judge Merchan's orders. He would absolutely fall within that 10 to 30% who would be sentenced to prison. But because his name is Donald Trump, who knows what will happen?
So, like I said, my view is he should get basically a fine or at worst community service.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'd love community service.
Yes, yeah.
But definitely not prison time or even suspended sentence. In my view, what's your view?
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I don't think that we should be putting non-violent offenders in jail. I mean, no, there are exceptions to that, but the kind of white-collar criminals who lost people's life savings and things like that, or who seriously defraud people, jail time for them absolutely fine. I think it's actually important to maintain the principle that non-violent offences like this, this isn't jail time.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest, while I would love community service,
yes.
I actually think if it was me, for the reasons I've said many times now during this podcast, I would give him a $113,000 fine, which is exactly what Hillary Clinton paid.
Yeah,
that's Dean Phillips.
Yes.
Has a different view.
Oh, does he?
Yes. Dean Phillips says Donald Trump is a serial liar, cheater, and philanderer, a 6-time declarer of corporate bankruptcy and instigator of insurrection, and a convicted felon who thrives on portraying himself as a victim. Kathy Hochul should pardon him for the good of the country. People went, what? And then he said, you think pardoning is stupid? Making him a martyr over a payment to a porn star is stupid. Election charges, entirely different. It's energizing his base, generating record sums of campaign cash, and will likely result in an electoral boost. What are your thoughts on that?
No, he's wrong. It's not resulting in an electoral boost, even if it's helping with his fundraising.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll do. I'm going to leave you guys on before we go to Chaz Unleashed and the Sting. I'm so excited about the Sting. I'm going to leave you guys on in this part of the podcast on a great note. I'm going to leave you, Dave, on this note, which you will love.
Okay.
I hope.
Yes.
It's a little toilet break before we go to the white flash. And this is Trump talking about declassification.
If you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these. Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
I
did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least
Do you think that would restore trust? help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about the way he died. It would be interesting to find out what happened there, because that was a weird situation, and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one. The other stuff I would definitely do the January 6th, because, beyond all of them.
I love that so much.
That's fantastic.
I will see you next week, Dave.
Yes, I will see you next week.
And I'll see you guys on the other side of the white flash. Welcome to the other side of the white flash for Chaz Unleashed. Love it. Thank you so much, Dan. Okay, now, for a start, I just need to finish off on that clip we just played you before, that Fox interview where they were talking about Epstein. I love that clip so much for so many reasons. I love the excuse that Trump gives for not wanting to declassify Epstein-related files. That he's worried about all those phony stuff out there, because that's something that Trump really worries a lot about. Phony stuff. You would want to spread phony stuff, would you, Donald? And also, I don't know if you've noticed this, but Trump's got a little tick, if you were, in interviews. He doesn't like saying no. He'll always say, yeah, maybe, yeah. Well, you go, well, so would you consider maybe killing everyone's firstborn? It's interesting. He just doesn't like to rule things out for whatever reason. It's just his particular pathology. He doesn't like ruling things out. When he says no, when he means no, he says maybe, right? In these interviews. And so for him to explicitly not just say, no, I'm not sure about the Epstein stuff, no, but then come back to it again and go, oh, I don't know about that, all the funny stuff, and then again he came back to it. That is basically him tearing his wig out and just going, no, as loud as he possibly can. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not implying anything conspiratorial here about him and Epstein. I'm just saying that either he knows someone or like one of his mates he's not necessarily tied to underage sex, but he's tied to Epstein in some way that he doesn't like and doesn't want to come out in public. I don't know what it is, but there's something that he really doesn't want to come out there, which is very funny. For instance, you might not know, but Virginia Giuffre, who's the chief accuser of Epstein, worked at Mar-a-Lago directly before she worked with Epstein. So I don't know if there's a connection there. I don't know, but whatever it is, I thought that was incredibly telling. And by the way, what's even more telling is when Fox News ran that interview. That was the unedited interview you saw there from YouTube. When they ran the interview, they cut out all the bits after yes. You know how when they asked Trump about Epstein, about releasing Epstein files, and he said yes, and then go, but maybe not. There's funny stuff. They cut all of that out. They left it yes. So they could have cut the question out, but they didn't. They left the question and they allowed their viewers to think his answer was just a simple yes, which was very dishonest. But anyway, really interesting clip, that one. All right, now we have about half an hour left, so I'm going to just finish off this Trump trial stuff, because I don't want to be talking about the Trump conviction next week as well. I really wanted to do immigration today, the immigration executive order. We talked a bit about it on Planet America, but I wanted to go into more detail here. I'm not going to have the time, so I'm going to have to push that off to next week. I'm afraid we'll hit the 3-hour mark, but depending on where we go, I might throw a couple of bonus correspondences at the end here. All right, so we were talking about sentencing before Dave had to go. The next thing about sentencing, of course, which a lot of people have been talking about, is whether if he gets a jail sentence, whether suspended or otherwise, if that will allow him to vote for himself. People are really into that question. Now, the Florida's Department of State website specifically says a felony conviction in another state makes a person ineligible to vote in Florida only if the conviction would make the person ineligible to vote in the state where the person was convicted. So in New York, you only can't vote when you're in prison. And so that rule will apply in Florida. Whatever the other states' rules are applies in Florida. So unless Trump is in prison, on election day, he can vote for himself. And even if he is in prison on election day, DeSantis can make an exception for him, which I think he's already indicated on Twitter that he would. So I don't think there's any danger that he's not going to be able to vote for himself. A lot of people know this, but I just wanted to just put it on the record. What a lot of people don't know, while they're talking about voting in Florida, another thing they're talking about is that Trump would be barred from going to a whole bunch of countries because he's a convicted felon. Eric Swalwell had a viral clip, which if I have time, I'll play it here, but if I don't have time, I won't, where he was reeling off all the countries that Donald Trump supposedly couldn't visit because he's a convicted felon in Congress, and they were trying to move on, and he just kept on going because he's a troll. That may be fun, that idea. It's mostly bullshit, though. It's really hard to fact check every single country because every single country has different rules. But the lists that you see online being passed around aren't true. I started off fact checking a few of them, and pretty much every country I went through, country by country, as I was fact checking it, it was like, nah, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. They all have rules. I mean, the reason they're on those lists is because they have rules that affect felons, but they wouldn't affect Trump. So, for instance, Japan is on those lists because they don't allow some felons to visit, but they allow visits of up to 90 days without a visa. So Trump can get there for 90 days, even with his felony. New Zealand doesn't allow some felons, but it doesn't restrict people who have served less than 12 months jail. Trump's not going to get more than 12 months jail because he's a first offender. So he'll be allowed to visit New Zealand. The UK, Americans don't have to apply for a visa at all to the UK. Anyone can go. Any criminal can go to the UK from America. So even though these countries appear to bar felons, they don't really. So forget that talking point. That's garbage. All right. A whole new section. Will great damage be done to the faith in the legal system? You're hearing this talking point quite a lot at the moment. Elon Musk, for instance, tweeted out, great damage was done today to the public's faith in the American legal system if a former president can be criminally convicted over such a trivial matter motivated by politics rather than justice, then anyone is at risk of a similar fate. And, well, look, some people's faith have certainly been affected. I mean, see the Larry Hogan situation. Even him mentioning the idea that we should have faith in the judicial system got him slapped down. They got him excommunicated. I'm not talking about Chris Lasavita, the campaign manager who slapped him down. Look at the comments underneath Larry Hogan's tweet. They are unanimously conservatives going, how can you say this? There is no justice anymore. The whole system's rigged. Isn't it obvious? Like, you're so naive. Go back to 1985 where you belong. Like, it's just, there's a lot of people there who have obviously lost some faith in the system. But if you only have faith in the legal system when you win every case, and not just every case, every first round of the case. This trial just now is just the first round. There is a second round of appeals. There's a third round of appeals. There's potentially a fourth round of appeals at the Supreme Court. Okay, so this series of cases has 4 rounds, and they lost the first round. And for them and the first round was only examining one part of the charge. It wasn't examining the legal side. It was examining the factual side. Okay, and the legal side is where, at least I think, and they think, things are dodgy. So you'd expect them to lose the first round. The second round is the one that matters. That's where they examine the legal side, right? And for people to go, well, I'm throwing all my toys out of the cot. I have no faith in the legal system because we lost one case in the first round where we probably should have lost it anyway. You just go, that's not faith. Okay, I know what the definition of faith is, and that's not faith. that is rolling while the times are good, and when the times go bad, then just bailing. That's what that is. Yeah. So, look, what I would put to those people, if there's someone who has lost their faith and they're getting down on me going, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, who cares? This is what I say to you. What would have happened if Trump hadn't been convicted? If he hadn't been convicted, a different group of people would have had less faith in the legal system because of that, wouldn't they? There would have been the left saying, oh my God, he clearly did these actions that this case was about, and he was still found not guilty. This whole thing's rigged. And that first round probably would have been the one that they should have been angry about, because that was the facts. On the facts, he clearly did those things. It was the legal situation where he might be tripped up, right? So anyway, my point is, when you have these situations, one side is going to lack faith as a result, or they're going to be pissed off as a result, and they're going to spit the dummy. That's just how it is. It is inevitable, in fact, with Trump. The issue is Trump being there in the first place, because he's creating these situations, right? It's inevitable when you nominate a criminal, which is what he is. He has committed a number. I'm not talking about because of the convicted felon thing. I'm talking about everything else he's done over the years. He's broken so many laws, so many labor laws, like stiffing people, not paying people, ripping people off, fraud. He's like, let's be honest here. Even Trump's greatest supporters must admit he has broken a stack of laws over the last 40 years. And if you're going to nominate a criminal to be your nominee, these kinds of scenarios will arise. They will end up in court. And you're going to back him, and because you nominated him, and the other side aren't going to back him, and one side's going to be pissed off at the results. This is inevitable. And it's not because of the legal system, it's because of him, introducing him into this scenario. Especially if he happens to have a personality where he's brazen enough a criminal to go to war with the legal system while that happens, because that makes it so much worse. Like if he was the kind of guy who goes, well, you know, you play up, you play up, you own up, you pay up, and then you shut up. If he was one of those guys, no problems. But no, he likes to go to war. And if he's going to go to war, it's going to make both sides even more vociferous and even angrier when they don't get their way. Now, some might say the problem here is not Trump, it's the lawfare. It's the fact that people are responding to Trump with the lawfare, with these trumped up charges, right? And they'll say this case should never have been brought. And as you know, I've said before, I agree that this case probably shouldn't have been brought. I would have preferred to have been a settlement just like Hillary Clinton got. But does anyone think that this reaction that we're seeing is because people are outraged by the case in particular? I would put to you that whatever case we were hearing now, even one of the legit cases like the documents case in Florida or the January 6th case, totally legit case, we'd get the same response. And the reason I say this is because the people who are talking about revenge right now regard Trump's other cases as part of the same lawfare. They talk about them as all one thing. They talk about all these trumped up charges, all these politicization. They refer to them as a unit, as lawfare, not just this one case and go, oh, but the other cases are okay. There are a couple of people who are like that, like the Dispatch. I know they often draw a distinction between this case and the other cases, but they are rare. Most people regard, most Trump supporters regard all the cases as lawfare, and they'll be just as angry for all of them. So once again, we get back to this inevitable situation. If you nominate a criminal, this situation will arise. So to me, this is the fault of the people who nominated Trump back in 2016. That was the original sin, and it's taken 8 years for us to see the full consequences. And we haven't even seen the full consequences yet. We've just seen a lot of consequences. We're starting to imagine what those full consequences will be down the track. And by the way, if it was up to the people who are currently crying, we would have reached this day a lot sooner. Because remember, those guys were behind lock her up. This could have been the Hillary Clinton prosecution like 6 years ago. And then it would have been the other side. It would have been the left crying versus the right. But I mean, once again, same kind of situation. All right. So what is going on here essentially is they're crying because they suffered a loss. That's what happened. It isn't about the rule of law. If you really cared about the rule of law, the answer is not to continue supporting your guy who's facing 57 criminal charges other than the ones we just had. And those charges are related to election tampering and national security. That's not what you do if you're really caring about the rule of law. What they care about is that they've lost. And that is what our politics is these days. People want to win all the time. They want to lose, or they don't like losing. They get very bitter. And it's not about the policy. It's not about the truth of the matter. They just pick a side like a sporting team, and they get really, really happy when they win, and they dunk in the other side's face, and they get really, really spoilt and pissed off when they lose, and then they vow retribution. That's how our politics works. Most importantly, though, in this section, is if you really care about faith in the justice system, if that's what you really care about, you don't go on about Stalin-esque show trials, okay? Because nothing destroys faith in the system more than that. And no one can seriously suggest that we just saw a Stalin-esque show trial, okay? The Stalin show trials involve torture, murdering family members. It wasn't like this. That is over the top. Even if you say what we just saw was politicized, look, fine, I'll give you that. It wasn't Stalin-esque. And this kind of talk of, oh, now it's Hitler, that is what poisons people's faith in the system more than anything. And you are responsible for that. Not the lawfare, not Trump. You are responsible for that. I'm speaking to the people who are saying that right now. And I would draw, for people who even pretend to care about the faith in the justice system, I would point you to Jonathan Turley, who, the guy can be a bit of an Eeyore, okay? We like to mock Jonathan Turley, but he was really upset about that ruling. And I understand why he was. Like, he really bet hard that the whole thing was just a joke. And it didn't come up the way he was expecting. And that surprised him, and that disappointed him. And this is how he reacted.
But it's moments like this when you're on the other side, when you disagree with a verdict, that you have to take a leap of faith in the rule of law. It's what defines us. Many people feel that this case really embodied the antithesis of that. But as a country as a whole, we have a system in place to review this. For Donald Trump, that's not going to happen before the election in all likelihood. But let's keep in mind that this is not the only court. It's just the first one.
First of all, he's emphasizing that this is the first step, which is true. And secondly, do you remember that phrase you use? Leap of faith. You need to take a leap of faith. He is keeping his faith in the justice system. That's faith. When there is evidence against your contention, but you keep believing in it anyway, that is what faith is. Okay, so if you had faith in the justice system, you wouldn't give up on it from one verdict, which is what Jonathan Turley is trying to tell you. Listen to Jonathan Turley. I want to just quickly go through the grounds for appeal. A lot of people are asking about, is there any reason for appeal or not? I think most of these aren't going to stack up, but I'll take you through them quickly. Certainly things like, do they need to show then that Michael Cohen's a liar or something? None of that applies, okay? It's not appealable to say, they should never have charged him. That's not appealable. That's just basic prosecutorial discretion. It's not appealable to say Michael Cohen's a massive liar. That's part of the facts. The facts are, whether you believe Michael Cohen or not is a factual question. The jury weighed in on that, okay? That doesn't get appealed. There need to be errors in the law made by either the prosecutor or the judge. So number one, they use the complicated nature of the New York law. They used a weird law, 17/152, which, if we super simplify it, boils down to the requirements down to this. They have to show that the records were falsified in order to promote Trump in an election by unlawful means. There were 3 potential unlawful means that are supplied. By far the most obvious one was federal election law. We've been through this. The jury instructions made that a simple conviction because they just had to find that Cohen made too large a contribution. That's easy to show, but that leads to 4 potential grounds for appeal from that application of the law. Number one, should you be allowed to use violating a federal law as the unlawful means through which a state crime is concealed. Can use a federal law as part of proving your state crime. Number 2, should you be allowed to use violating that federal law as the unlawful means after federal officials have explicitly foregone charging that same crime? Because remember, the feds said, no, we're not going to charge that. Can the state guys use that crime then after the feds decide to not apply their prosecutorial discretion? 3, should you be able to use violating that federal law as the unlawful means and not have to show that that federal law is actually violated? Because you didn't. Like, there are all these elements to prove that federal law, to make up that federal law, like if you're actually prosecuting that federal law, they didn't, the jury instructions didn't mention any of them. And I'll tell you now, there are a number of them that were arguably not met, which is probably the reason the feds didn't prosecute Trump. Well, maybe that's the reason the feds didn't prosecute Trump. That wasn't an issue in this trial at all. They just ignored that. They just said, does it sound kind of like it's a violation of federal election law, without looking at any of the elements? So are you allowed to do that? And number 4, coming from a different angle, if you're turning a misdemeanor into a felony by saying it's for the purpose of covering up another crime, can you charge that felony when the statute of limitations has expired on that misdemeanor? Because that's what they've done. They're saying the misdemeanor is the basis for this felony, but even though the misdemeanor statute of limitations has expired, we're still gonna prosecute you for that felony. Can you do that as a matter of law? So those are 4 legal questions. So they're all coming up during the appeal, potentially. I personally think there's every chance that one of those 4 technical aspects could succeed. I think they're the strongest grounds for appeal. Plenty of legal experts disagree with me, though, and I'm not a legal expert, so you should probably listen to them. This is Eli Honig from CNN's take, for what it's worth. He says the charges against Trump are obscure and nearly entirely unprecedented. In fact, no state prosecutor in New York or Wyoming or anywhere has ever charged federal election laws as a direct or predicate state crime against anyone for anything. None. Ever. Even putting aside the specifics of election law, the Manhattan DA itself almost never brings any case in which falsification of business records is the only charge. So he's on my side, but who knows? Number 2, the judge's instructions, the unanimity question, which I'm sure you've heard about. The judge's instructions are a classic item that you can appeal. The judge gave the jury 3 different ways that the promotion of Trump's election could be unlawful, and he allowed them to choose. Now, Trump said, it's ridiculous, unconstitutional, and un-American that the highly conflicted radical left judge is not requiring a unanimous decision on the fake charges against me brought by Soros-backed DA Alvin Bragg. A third world election interference hoax, he says. But this is theoretically actually in line with New York law. Perfectly in line. New York law says if it's an element of the offense, then the jury must be unanimous. But if it's just a means by which the offense was committed, then they do not need to be unanimous. So, for example, in order to convict someone of murder, the jury must unanimously conclude he did it, but they don't have to agree on whether he did it with a gun, a knife, or a baseball bat, for instance. In this case, the unlawful ways that he promoted his campaign was not the actual element of the crime. The element of the crime was the falsifying of the records. So maybe the appeals court, I mean, in my view, I wouldn't grant that as a grounds for appeal. I'd say that they actually were within New York law there. Maybe the appeals court would disagree with me, but that's the grounds, the specific technical grounds. I should also say the 3 choices they gave were very last second, even though they announced to the defense earlier on, they didn't announce it to the jury until the last second, until the closing remarks from the prosecution, after the closing remarks from the defense. So defense had nothing to say about those 3 elements. Even though the defense, if they were competent, they would have remembered the prosecution told them about this back in November last year, and they would have brought it up themselves. They never did. So that's on them, I guess. But just from a due process point of view for the jury, it would have been much nicer if they were talking about this during the trial And they were going through these three particular unlawful means one by one, and the prosecution would present their case, and the defense would try and rebut that case. None of that happened, even though this was a critical part of the verdict. So one might argue that technically due process wasn't followed. That might be more a Supreme Court argument, because that's like a Sixth Amendment thing about due process, but whatever, that is a legal potential grounds for appeal. The fact that the entire three unlawful means were left until the very end, not during the trial. I hate that they did that, by the way. I hate that they left it till the end. I think that was pretty poor. Number 3, the judge allowed too much of Stormy's testimony. We've heard about this in public. People have talked about this. The theory is that it's prejudicial to the defendant, outweighing its probative value for the case. But like I said before, Trump's strategy made her relevant. She had to prove her credibility with detail because he was assailing her credibility. They also need that detail to show why Trump would want to pay hush money. And also, as the judge said at the time, the defense could have objected a whole lot more. So maybe the Court of Appeals have a problem with that. But we'll see. They did have a problem with that in the Harvey Weinstein case, but that's not a direct parallel. So I shouldn't bring it up, I guess. Pretend I didn't say that. Number 4, not allowing key witnesses. Now, Trump loved whinging about witnesses being called, like, for instance, this one.
Time ago. But a lot of key witnesses were not called. Look at your list. Look at the players. And you know who I'm talking about. You can take 5 or 6 of them. Why didn't they call those witnesses? They didn't call them because they would have been on our side. And it's a shame. And in particular, one witness who's now suffering gravely because of what's happened, because of the viciousness of these thugs.
So Trump's talking about Alan Weisselberg there, his chief financial officer currently in prison for perjury. That was a nonsensical argument from Trump, of course, because he could have called any of those witnesses. All the witnesses he said they didn't call. Well, why didn't he call them if he thought they'd help him? That's his job as the defense. It's saying that the witnesses the prosecution didn't call would have helped him, and so it's rigged that the prosecution didn't call them. That blows my mind. It's not a good argument. There was one witness, though, that he did have a legit argument about, I feel, which is Brad Smith, the ex-chair of the Federal Elections Commission. He's a Republican. He was giving them what they wanted to hear, but he's also one of the absolute experts in federal elections law in the country. The judge would let him testify, but not about the actual substance of the case. The defense wanted to get him to testify about what makes a campaign expense versus a personal expense. As you know, we discussed that a lot during the trial. Smith's view is that those definitions clearly define the hush money as a personal expense, and so Trump was clearly not guilty of unlawful misreporting campaign expenses, according to the guy who is pretty much the expert on campaign finance law in America, right? Even though he's biased as all hell, like we should say. And the judge wasn't going to let him testify on that matter. I'd be interested how he regards the Karen McDougal payments by the National Enquirer, because they were never reimbursed at the time. So are they a personal expense as well? Or how are they a personal expense for the National Enquirer? That doesn't make sense. Or are they a campaign expense? That's an interesting argument, which you're never going to hear because Brad Smith wasn't allowed to testify about that topic. That might have been a cross-examination question. But either way, the judge didn't want to hear his views. The reason for that was because Merchant was worried that if they got Smith to testify, then the prosecution would need to have their own expert testify, to be fair. And then Merchant would have had his own view of what's relevant, what's not relevant. And then the jury would have had 3 competing theories, which would have been confusing to them. And it would have been confusing to them because, remember, you can't take transcripts in there, and they would have to try and work it out in their heads, who was right, who was wrong. I can see Merchant's logic, but the appellate court may not agree with that logic. We'll see. Number 5, other judges' instructions, like, for instance, he never instructed the jury that paying hush money is not a crime, which the prosecution were really trying to imply that paying the hush money bit was the crime. Like, they kind of implied that quite a bit in a tricky way. But so he probably should have been very explicit that paying hush money is not a crime. It was how it was recorded. So that's one potential grounds. Another one is that the recent Supreme Court definition and state definition of intention to defraud are different. The Supreme Court definition is the intention to deprive someone of money, property, or some other concrete good through deception. In other words, it needs to involve money. And that was clearly not the case with the Trump hush money payments. The fraud wasn't about money, it was about misdeclaring. The state definition is much more broad and definitely broad enough to include Trump's payments. So Merchan picked the state definition in his instructions. Does the appellate court believe he should have chosen the state definition or the Supreme Court definition? That may be a grounds for appeal. Number 6, bias. You know the ones, the bags bias, judges bias, jury's bias. I don't think any of them are going to apply because the standard to meet them is unimaginably high. For the prosecutor, Trump would have to show that similarly situated individuals who do not share Trump's political views were not prosecuted for the same acts. That's pretty hard to demonstrate because no one has ever been in exactly his position. Even Hillary Clinton's case wasn't exactly like this. So there are important differences between him and Hillary. So you just can't demonstrate it. There's no one out there with exactly the same circumstances who wasn't charged. The location question, we talked about this. Trump lived in Manhattan. Of course, it should be held in Manhattan. He committed crimes in Manhattan. And good luck showing the jury bias was so great that they should have moved the trial. I don't know how you show that. I don't know how you do that. The constitutional interpretation of whether the judge should have been recused only really requires a judge to be removed when they have a financial stake in the outcome or when the judge has an unusual personal stake in the case. Like I've said a million times, his daughter gets no extra money because of the outcome, so that doesn't get there. Even though she gets lots of money from Democrats, not because of that outcome, one way or another. And I should say as well, if you use the constitutional interpretation of the judge needing a financial stake to recuse, Alito doesn't get there either for the upside down flag. Even though if I was him, I have said now a number of times, I would have recused myself. I don't think you could force him under the constitutional interpretation at least. That would be a court case between constitutional interpretation versus the statute interpretation. I think the constitutional interpretation would probably win, to be honest. So I don't think you could force him. Anyway, my point is all of this is only relevant if Merchan made bad calls anyway. And so if he made bad calls, then you might be able to get this thrown out because of those bad calls, which we've been through a number of potential bad calls there. So they're all the reasons why there might be an appeal that I've seen. I continue to think it will be successfully appealed, but I wouldn't be shocked if it wasn't. I just think it will be. I'm just about out of time here, but I do have one correspondence I want to talk about. It's a gag order correspondence from Lisa. Surely some things Trump said in the press conference will be considered contempt of court. If not about Cohen, but what he said about Judge Merchan. Did I hear someone say the judge may consider what he says between now and sentencing when he decides on his punishment? Yes. The judge can decide. The punishment can be affected by what Trump says in the meantime. What he says about the judge doesn't matter. The judge isn't part of the gag order. What he says about Cohen does matter. Cohen is part of the gag order. I'm actually going to do some instant correspondence here because I'm recording this at 6 a.m. I've just finished the edit. We had all kinds of dramas with the tape not working and all. I thought we'd lost it for a while there. I was very, very upset. But we've got it done. I've got it done. But because this is so late, I've now seen the comments from Planet America from Friday night, and I can see that a bunch of people they've had a problem with me saying that the gag order should be lifted right now, because at the moment the gag order is not supposed to be lifted until the sentencing is over. But the sentencing is after the debate. And so Trump's saying, can you please lift the gag order now, or at least for the debate, so I can defend myself in the debate, with the unhindered. And I said on Planet America, you should definitely lift the gag order now. The gag order was to protect people during the trial. The trial's over. So now we move on. Gag order gone. And Merchan may well lift the gag order. They've had a petition, Trump's petition to lift the gag order. Alvin Bragg is resisting, but maybe the Merchan will rule on it soon. So he may well agree with me, but whatever. People have been quite upset about that. Quite a number of people have been upset about my view, and they said, "Well, what happens if he incites violence against the jurors in the debate?" Okay, look, fair enough. He might say some insane things in the debate. I'm not saying he won't, but let me just make very clear in response. Like I said, the gag order is not supposed to protect jurors and witnesses from Trump for the rest of their lives. It's meant to protect them during the trial. And the trial is over. The First Amendment is sacred in America. You can't impinge on it unless you have a really good reason. And protecting people during a trial is a really good reason. But what's the difference between after the trial before sentencing, after the trial after sentencing? There's no difference. Unless you're going to protect them for the rest of their lives, you might as well just drop the gag order now because the trial is over. And yes, by the way, I agree with those people who say, why does he need to defend himself by attacking jurors and witnesses? I agree. It's ridiculous. But clearly Trump thinks that's how he defends himself because that's how he spent the entire trial. All they were doing was attacking Stormy Daniels and Cohen's honesty. They thought that was their defense. So even though they're wrong, that was a bad defense and they lost because of it, Trump's going to, of course he's going to defend himself by attacking Stormy Daniels and Cohen. He won't attack the jurors, but he'll be going, oh, they were liars. Yeah, let him do it. That's his right. It will backfire on him. And if he attacks the judge and the jury and all those people like too much at the debate, that will hurt him. It will backfire in a big way. So, he'll be dumb if he does it, but it's his right to do it. It should be his right to do it if he wants to. So that's why I think they should lift the gag order right now. We've done the trial. Let's move on. Hopefully Trump will move on as well. I am now well over time. I'm going to have to do a little bit of an edit to get this under 3 hours. But thank you so much for sticking around to Just Unleashed. Play that sting to death. I love it. Thank you, Dan. I will see you guys next week. Till then, stay peppy.